I don't have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. The video you are currently watching is an altered item. You need to listen to the next steps very carefully, okay? You need to... Alright, that's enough screwing around. Hello, and welcome to my control video that I promised over a year now. Jesus Christ, I've been procrastinating. So for anyone who doesn't know, I've been going through the connected universe of Remedy games. Remedy being a Finnish game studio / developer, most known for Max Payne, Alan Wake 1, and more recently Alan Wake 2. Control is their other main game in the sort of Alan Wake universe. And if you want an in-depth analysis on everything Alan Wake leading up to Alan Wake 2, there is a way too fucking long video you can check out. Control is within that same universe set after Alan Wake 1, but before Alan Wake 2. For the most part, Control deals with its own kind of separate rabbit hole of lore, and because of that, I've wanted to talk about Control because it's a game I really, really like and highly appreciate for a very long time now. I will only be diving into the main game in this video, because the main game itself is a lot. There are 2 DLCs. One of them is directly connected to Alan Wake, and I even talked about it in the Alan Wake video. But I would rather talk about both DLCs, the Alan Wake related one and the other separate one, the Foundation, in a separate video than this one, because I've learned my lesson from making a video that is way too long. I would rather not do that. Hopefully I can keep this video under 1 fucking hour. Liar! Also, Control is a very red game. You know, there's a lot of red in that color palette. So to keep with the theme, I got my red light here. Very spooky and atmospheric. I'm gonna get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So a little bit of background on Control itself. Control was completed in 3 years at only 30 million euros, which is some amount of American money. I didn't do the conversion, but in AAA development, that is an incredibly short amount of time, especially considering Alan Wake 1 took 7 years and everyone knows how long Alan Wake 2 took. They began developing Control as Remedy was finishing Quantum Break, the game that they had made as an exclusive deal with Microsoft. Side note, Quantum Break is part of this Remedy connected universe, and I even played it twice like years ago, and I recorded all of both playthroughs. The whole gimmick of the game is at certain points you can make choices that slightly affect what you watch happens on screen. Like, it affects the details, but the main story is the same. And I did both playthroughs. I did half the choices in one playthrough, and then I did a playthrough where I did all of the opposite choices, and I got like every possible scene. And then, despite how long that took, when it came to making a video, I had literally nothing to say about Quantum Break. Like, it was just okay. And I had played it twice in a row, so I'm sorry to the 4 fans of Quantum Break. I'm sure you're deeply disappointed in me, but I did just want to mention, yes, Quantum Break is related to the Remedy cinematic universe. I simply have nothing to say about it. Remedy had branched into some full motion video aspects in Quantum Break, and taking those FMV aspects, Sam Lake and, oh shit, I'm gonna screw this guy's name up, Mikhail Kasurinen? Mikhail Kasurinen? I butchered that for sure. Sam Lake and Mikhail, the 2 lead creatives of Alan Wake and Control, wanted to bring some of those FMV aspects into Control, but not have them interrupt the main game, which was kind of a major complaint of Quantum Break, and also just wanted to improve replayability, because despite Quantum Break having player choices, it wasn't really that replayable. For the story and setting of Control, they took a lot of influence from SCP. You're probably familiar with SCP if you're a fucking internet dweller like me, but in case you're not, it's known as what is probably the biggest writing collaborative project, as basically anyone on the internet can detail the findings of the Secure, Contain, Protect Foundation, which is presented as this secret government institute that contains and protects supernatural items. They have a whole website you can go on and write your own SCP, and they can be anything. It could be as dumb as like a spoon that doesn't let you eat ice cream, to like a Lovecraftian god that might eat Earth if it wants to. The point is that SCP is a secret government institute that contains and protects supernatural items and deities, and the Control team was inspired by that, as well as a Clockwork Orange when it comes to weird psychological aspects, and The Shape of Water due to it being a very oppressive and bureaucratic government system. And since the whole game is also set in a classic bureaucratic government building, the designers took a lot of inspiration from brutalist architecture, which a lot of real government buildings have. Brutalist architecture emerged in the 1950s, and it's basically known for having materials look unfinished, or having the colors be flat, like gray or black or white, or the shapes and lines being generally sharp and very distinct. They also took inspiration from several other architects and architect works to make specific places like lighting or stairwells in the game. Brutalist architecture in a very oppressive, supernatural government setting sums up Control actually pretty well, so I would say that those inspirations were well used. Remedy also shows that they like having the same actors play different roles, as the voice of Alan Wake, Matthew Peretta, also plays a very important and different character in Control. The inspiration that the Control team took from other media actually ended up becoming full circle, because the popular Apple TV exclusive show Severance cited that Control was actually a big inspiration for designing the similar anomalous and unknowable world, and also the main setting of the show, which is the office of Lumen. That is also a very good show, by the way. Control would come out in 2019 and be received very well, selling 5 million copies and becoming one of Remedy's most successful titles. It's time we get into Control. And also, obviously, spoilers ahead, I mean, duh. The game begins with the player character, Jesse, seemingly talking to us.
You called me. So here I am. I know I shut you out sometimes. I'm always glad to hear from you. It's just that I get my hopes up. So many times it's led to nothing. I found nothing. It's like we live in a room, and there's a poster on the wall. We stare at it, and we think that's the whole world. The room, and the poster. The picture's something nice. A landscape, a famous person. Like in that movie, what is it called? The prison movie.
After a not-so-obvious Shawshank Redemption reference, Jesse enters a tall, dark building looming over New York, the Federal Bureau of Control in New York City, and says that you brought me here. There are brief flashes of a circle pattern, which is also the pattern on the opening screen. I won't get into what the circle pattern is right now, as I'll bring stuff up as it gets important, but just know that the circle pattern sort of guides Jesse, and it points her to literal locations in the game or where to go next. We can see several portraits in the front, the current director Trench, and a picture of a janitor. Jesse can also look at the FBC seal and comments about seeing it a long time ago. Jesse finds the janitor, the one from the portrait, Ahti, who's actually just this chill Finnish dude.
Janitor's assistant. You need to go to the interview. Go that way to the elevator.
Thanks. Elevator that way. Got it.
Very good. I'm Ahti, the janitor, by the way. You'll work for me. You can say I sent you. If they don't hire you, then you are no helvet. There be work for the axe. Take them behind the sauna, Jumal.
After pointing Jesse to the elevator, he immediately breaks the fourth wall by responding to Jesse's inner monologue.
See, the janitor is a friendly face in my book.
Better than somebody with no face at all. Think about it. No face.
immediately implying Ahti is sort of knows more than he's letting on. Jesse enters the elevator, which, if you're paying attention, is in a place it previously wasn't. While walking, Jesse very briefly sums up why she's here.
What's on my mind? My baby brother, Dylan. 17 years since the men of this bureau took him.
Eventually, Jesse approaches the director's office and hears a gunshot. Entering, she finds the director dead on the floor, having committed suicide by shooting himself.
Shit. You want me to...
Jesse's guiding force tells her to pick up the gun, which is certainly a good idea, right? I mean, pick up the murder weapon?
What could possibly go wrong?
Picking up the gun makes Jesse see what is known as the board, represented only by an upside-down black pyramid and a white void. They make weird, strange noises. The sound in this game's amazing. The noise the board makes that like literally can't be understood is such a great aspect, and it's so interesting to me because from what I can tell, it's like a layer of several voices that are distorted, and then they used probably every audio effect in the bin and some like radio static is what it sounds like, or distortion, just to make it like truly unintelligible. So it's not like they're just speaking backwards or something. It's like genuinely this garble that you just don't know, and I don't know why. It's just a fascinating sound, and the soundscape in the entire game is great, but I think the board sound specifically kind of sums up how great and strange it is. The board can only be understood by reading the subtitles, and even in the subtitles they speak in a very strange and hard to understand way, using sort of synonyms as a sort of like double word way of talking. It's unknown exactly why they do this because we know very little about the board. Again, it adds to the I don't understand what I'm supposed to be looking at feeling that the whole game is very good at doing. After the board appears, a video of a man named Dr. Casper Darling. He's played by our big man Matthew Peretta. Casper Darling is the head of research at the FBC, and he explains what the gun is, the gun that Trent used to shoot himself.
The service weapon is, of course, a prime example of an OOP, a very powerful one. Ingrained in the Bureau's DNA, a key component in our prime candidate program. Come out of that Russian roulette a winner and you're it.
So there's some more details on this later, but essentially the gun is called the service weapon, and it's known as an object of power, or OOP. OOPs are always mundane objects, or in the gun's case, it's a real weapon, but it's a very common, like image, like everyone knows what a gun is. But these objects are imbued with supernatural energy that only certain people, like Jesse, can bound. Bounding it is the game's term that basically means you can use the powers that the object has, but not everybody can do this. The collectible on the service weapon also states it was discovered in the oldest house in what is now the director's office. A popular theory is that the service weapon takes the form of powerful weapons in the past, such as Mjolnir or Excalibur. It also says that the director can use it, and the board picks the director through some unknown criteria. If the board doesn't like that person, then they're killed. Also, a lot of the paper documents and collectibles in the game have redacted or blacked out info. So insert reference to Epstein files here. That's my topical joke of the video. I've reached my current event joke quota. And check that off. Somebody was gonna say the thing about the Epstein files. I did it for you. Using the gun, Jesse is transported to a place called the Astral Plane, which is where the board resides, and has to complete a challenge to become worthy of being the director. Upon completing the challenge, the board officially appoints Jesse as the director, which is a hell of a promotion. I mean, she literally just walked in here, and Jesse hears a broken up message from the dead director, Trench.
Something's coming. This threat. An attack. Duty as director. Keep the Bureau safe.
Did you hear that? It's the dead man.
Exiting the office, a red entity tries to take over Jesse before being stopped by Jesse's guiding force.
You stopped it. You... Oh, thank you.
Jesse has discovered everyone in the office is possessed by this red entity, and they become the game's enemies. The red entity is called the Hiss, because, fucking surprise, surprise, they make a hiss sound. And if it helps to understand, it's pretty similar to the Darkness in Alan Wake. It's basically just a supernatural entity that can possess and take over people. And in Alan Wake, the Darkness creates the game's main enemies, and is mostly mysterious and unknown, similar to the Hiss. They basically work the same. They are two separate entities, like the Hiss is not the same as the Darkness in the world, but they basically work the same. Now, having to fight through the FBC, Jesse gets another message from Trench, saying that she has to reach something called the Hotline for a secure line of communication.
The hotline. Secure line of communication.
Jesse finds the first alive and not possessed human, Emily Pope, Dr. Darling's research assistant. Emily explains that the building is on lockdown due to the Hiss, which means no one should be able to enter it, meaning that Jesse entering it should have been impossible. Jesse also can't seem to be possessed by the Hiss, but Emily explains the only way any of them can be safe from the Hiss.
It seems to have spread everywhere and to everyone, not protected by an HRA. And, extraordinarily, you.
Jesse can cleanse control points from Hiss, which in gameplay serve as checkpoints once cleansed. They're basically Dark Souls bonfires, but can't cleanse a specific Hiss-possessed person, as trying to do so just evaporates them. Jesse talks to Emily and reveals some more details about why she's here.
Listen, the Bureau was involved in an incident in my hometown, Ordinary, 17 years ago. The Bureau came in and covered the whole thing up. I've been looking for this place for a long time.
That's enough. Maybe that's too much already. I can't tell her about Dylan and the rest yet.
I've seen mentions of an Altered World event case dealing with Ordinary.
AWE means Altered World Event, which is essentially a supernatural occurrence that occurred somewhere in the real world, but the FBC has to cover it up and hide it and pretend like it was just some normal real world thing, like a storm happened or an animal, and not a supernatural event.
You were at Ground Zero as a child? It was one of the big ones, and before my time. And very classified. I can try to dig out some old files for you. My boss, Casper Darling, would know, but he's missing. I think he knew this was coming, or suspected. He came up with the HRAs, the Hedron Resonance Amplifiers. I think they're what saved us. Or a few of us.
You say Darling handed the HRAs out before the Hiss attacked? I'm kidding. The game obviously wants you to think Darling is suspicious, but not knowing anything about Ordinary, the next order is to do what Trench said and to find the hotline, which is explained to be another OOP that allows the director, and only the director, to communicate directly with the board. There's also some optional dialogue, which is never mandatory, but some of it is interesting and lets us know more about the world itself. Emily can talk about the Bureau building itself, which is called the Oldest House.
This building, the Bureau headquarters, the Oldest House, is a shifting place. You've seen it. It transcends its physical limits.
I've been to New York a few times. How didn't I notice this place?
It's an attribute of the building. This is a place of power. The Oldest House doesn't like attention, so unless you're purposely trying to find it, you don't, which is perfect for us.
If we talk a little bit more with Emily, she discusses how the Hiss infestation may have started.
I'm not sure. You said the Hiss was here when you entered. Did you see anything like that outside before you came in?
No, just inside.
The source is internal then.
Man, it's gotta be fucking weird to work at a place that has like a special name. Like, yeah, the White House is called that, but I'm sure they just call it work. I'm sure anyone who works in there just calls it work. The Oldest House is what's called a place of power, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's an entire location that has constant supernatural properties. The term place of power is only ever used when referring to the Oldest House, but I feel like one could argue Cauldron Lake and Alan Wake is also a place of power. Small detail, anyway. We'll get more specific into the weird shit that the old house does, but its basic properties are that it can move rooms and walls around, which are events called building shifts, which we even saw earlier with the elevator that wasn't there before. The Oldest House collectible reveals the oldest house was found in 1964, when the Bureau was investigating an AWE.
We discovered the oldest house while investigating a suspected altered world event case in the New York City subway tunnels. The agents found their way up into the building. Once we became aware of it, it was there. For the rest of the population, it was hiding in plain sight, a slippery blind spot, seemingly discouraging observation. It's a place of power, an ongoing AWE of its own, seemingly adhering to its physical outer constraints and yet constantly breaking the known boundaries of reality. It's unstable, shifting. After extensive research and investigation, the Bureau made the building its headquarters on November 13th, 1968.
The DLC, The Foundation, goes more into the origins of the Oldest House, although you don't get a lot of clear answers. In Darling's Astral Plane video, he even mentions how the Oldest House is connected to both the board and the Astral Plane, but he can't explain how. On the way to the hotline, Jesse finds another OOP, a floppy disk with telekinesis, and upon bounding it, gets what I think is the greatest ability in the game, Launch. Being able to pick up random objects or just like tear chunks out of the wall and pick up like other enemy bodies and throw them around at enemies, literally that never gets old. Darling explains more about the floppy disk itself.
Stolen by our friends at the CIA, the disk held the launch codes to Soviet nukes. This is not the disk, of course, but one exactly like it. A perfect fusion of concepts vibrating in the Cold War era collective unconscious. A receptacle. It is a receptacle for dangerous energies to hone in on, and they did.
The board says that the Hiss is trying to burrow itself into the astral plane, and obviously the board does not want that. Jesse fights the now Hiss-corrupted head of communications, Tomasi, who flies now.
They can fly now.
They fly now!
He escapes before being taken care of, but allows Jesse to proceed to the hotline. But to get to the hotline, Jesse has to cross one more thing.
The Ocean View Motel and Casino. Dream Logic. The light switch cord.
The motel can only be entered by pulling a light switch specifically 3 times, and upon entering it, serves as a sort of interdimensional pathway between other areas. No one knows where the hotel actually is, and it's impossible to exit its walls. Jesse remarks the hotel always feels familiar, which is intentional, as it always looks like one of those roadside motels you would stop at. I mentioned this game in my Liminal Spaces video, and although the whole game obviously takes on the vibe of liminality and liminal space, I've always loved the motel the most because it really nails that perfect, almost deja vu, this stereotypical motel that you can swear you've been in at some point, but it also exists like outside of the laws of reality. It's such a great concept. There are many doors with strange symbols on them. Jesse can only ever enter the door with the black pyramid, having to solve a puzzle to get through the door and finally obtain the hotline. Here's how Darling explains the hotline.
It's an object of power. It doesn't connect to any typical network. A direct line to the astral plane and the board. And my hypothesis is, under the right conditions, to other planes of existence as well.
Now that we have the hotline, we can fully understand Trench's messages, and he reflects on his relationship with the hotline. He describes hearing the hotline ring in his dreams, but not picking it up, and wonders if the board could have warned him about the Hiss, before devolving into what sounds like paranoid rambling.
Do I fear their answers? Would they have warned me of this threat? I didn't see it coming. The traitor in our midst. A conspiracy plotted right behind me. I can't trust anyone. I must assume all my intel has been manipulated. The hotline is the only channel I can trust. Bind it, control it. The rule and the ritual with objects of power. It can't be tampered with. The lifeline to the astral plane and the board. I must seek guidance. Soon. I'll rest first. I'm so tired. Always tired now. But I must reach the hotline. I think I'm under attack. An attack of dementia, exhaustion. It's a rain cloud making me forget. The hotline. I must reach the hotline.
The file on the hotline reveals the origin is unknown and that it kind of just appeared on the desk of Director Northmore, which is the director before Trench. The hotline security log shows that besides 2 custodians, Trench had last entered the chamber on October 1st, 2019, which is interesting because the game states the Hiss invaded on October 29th, 2019. Since the message from Trench implies that the board did not warn him about the Hiss, it's strange that he went so long without even talking to the board. Now that we can understand Trench, he points us to our next goal by describing his management team, which are his most trusted employees.
These people know the secrets of the Bureau as well as I do. Some even better. Darling, Tomasi, Salvador, Marshall. Marshall especially, my head of operations. She sees right through me. She knows I don't like relying on people. The only person you should fail is yourself. But things change when you become director.
Emily says that the surviving management team, since, we can't exactly go to Tomasi, is split up across sectors in the oldest house. But there's an internal lockdown as well as an external lockdown. The internal lockdown prevents getting from one sector to another, and only the director can lift the internal lockdown. So Jesse will of course have to lift that first. In the internal lockdown hotline message, Trench comments on how the board will advise you but always wants something in return, and that he had to lose everything, including his family, before he realized that the Bureau is the only thing the director has, although he doesn't elaborate more on losing his family or the Bureau being the only thing the director has. At this point in the game, we've also unlocked ability points to upgrade Jesse in various ways, such as getting more health, or energy for abilities, or my favorite, more crazy shit to do with launch, and we unlock the ability to create items to equip on both Jesse and also the gun. We can change both Jesse and the gun's stats, and also make new gun forms for the service weapon. I always like the idea that the only weapon in the game is the service weapon. I mean, unless you count Jesse herself as a weapon, because, she can fucking launch shit. But you can, craft different gun forms, which all play differently, and you can customize them a little bit with what you can attach on the gun forms. Jesse hears Ahti singing in Finnish in the elevator, and upon approaching, gets a message from Ahti, pointing her to the maintenance sector, which likely due to Ahti's mysterious abilities, Jesse is able to access the maintenance sector access hallway, despite the internal lockdown. Jesse considers the possibility that Ahti is what got Jesse into the oldest house in the beginning, since, it seems he's kind of able to bypass things. If it's not clear yet, Ahti is very much not a normal dude. He's not even a dude at all. I'll get more into him later, but Ahti just has some very strange and interesting powers, and some very strange and interesting knowledge that makes him a lot more than just a weird janitor. Once Jesse finds Ahti, he says he can help lift the lockdown, but Jesse has to help him fix the cooling pumps in the power plant. We also burn trash. Well, that's a side mission, but it is a very important part of the game. Jesse can also find a carnival wheel horse OOP, which once bounding lets her dash. Finding the power plant, we can also talk to Simon Arish, the chief of security appointed by Salvador, who's the head of security, to protect the power plant. Arish mentions some more about Darling's last sightings before the Hiss invaded.
NSC?
Oh, sorry. Bureau jargon. It's what we call the power plant. The big rumbling metal thing. Salvador, head of security, asked me to protect it in case of an attack. See, what's inside is dangerous. Dr. Darling seemed to know it would be a target.
Darling? He's here?
No, he came down a few days ago, before everything went to hell. He was out of it. Smelled like a bar mat. He was ranting about vulnerabilities and how he only had one large-scale HRA, but that he needed it somewhere else. Still, at least he gave us these personal HRAs before he left. Hey, did I mention that he was tearing his clothes off? Crazy dude.
Darling knew the Hiss was coming.
So Darling says he only had one large-scale HRA and it was somewhere else?
Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which suggestions or warnings about events to come are dropped or planted. Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Arish can also talk about the Hiss, saying they use the same tactics Salvador and Marshall taught the security team. Which means the corrupted either still have some memory of who they are, or the Hiss is just using whatever it finds in the brains of the victims. Arish also says Ahti is likely the most knowledgeable person about the Bureau, but no one can ever understand what he's saying. After fixing the coolant pumps, energy converters, and dealing with something called the Clog, which out of all of the things in this game, I do not want to know more about, that is so gross, Jesse lifts the internal lockdown by literally using the service weapon as a key. Returning to Emily, Jesse finally explains everything as to what happened with both her brother and Ordinary.
I have a younger brother, Dylan. When we were kids, we found an old slide projector in Ordinary's landfill. The slides created doorways to other places. Bad things happened. Came through.
That's all she gets. The rest stays locked inside.
But we found help. Through one of the doorways, we met something. A being.
A being? What kind of being?
It's hard to describe, but she helped us. We managed to turn the projector off. The bad things that came through the doorways were gone. After that, your people came. Tried to grab us. I ran away. They got Dylan.
I left him behind.
Bureau agents took your brother?
Yes. You covered it up. No one believed me. I just want to find Dylan. I've been looking for him ever since.
What happened to the slide projector? It sounds like another object of power.
I thought you took it. The Bureau. Along with Dylan.
I've never heard of it. But around here, I assume everything's classified. You know, I looked into the Ordinary AWE case files after you mentioned it. Trench and Darling were both involved. A large area of the containment sector was reserved for it. The case hasn't been active for a long time. I have no idea if anything's still there. Can you tell me more about this being you found?
Let's hope you two get along.
She's been with me ever since Ordinary. In my head. She led me to you. I call her Polaris.
As in a guiding star. Did Polaris know about the Hiss? If she got you in here in spite of the lockdown, she's very powerful. Which may help explain your test results. Your readings are incredible, Jesse. Now, cross-referencing them with the database, I found 2 matches in Darling's old classified files. Unfortunately, I can't access them beyond the file codes, but one was P6, referring to a prime candidate for a potential future bureau director. This was logged years ago.
Dylan. Is that Dylan?
The other match is on something called Hedron, which must be connected to these Hedron resonance amplifiers somehow. All I know is that Marshall went to the research sector to secure the HRA production after the Hiss first attacked.
So, Marshall seems like our best lead on Dylan.
I need to go after her.
Jesse can ask Emily a lot of things here, such as where Darling would likely be, which reveals a little bit about her and Darling's relationship.
It's in research, or one of his labs. Dr. Darling has quite a few, all around the Bureau. Could be hiding in any one of them. I check myself, but I don't have access to most of them.
Sounds like I touched a nerve.
He didn't let you into his labs?
Not all of them, no. Some had volatile material. It's ridiculous. I mean, this whole place is volatile material. Could have at least thought up a more convincing lie. I mean, how can I work without access to all the data possible?
Jesse can discuss the Ocean View Motel, revealing that everyone in the FBC can only enter the Black Pyramid door, but Emily does give her own theory about the other doors.
The whole place. I mean, look at all the doors inside it. Where do they all go? We know that one door leads to the oldest house, but how come we can only ever open that one door? Maybe to open a door, you have to have entered through it. So if every door leads to a different dimension, plane, reality, whatever you want to call it, then I believe that the motel is firm proof that parallel universes...
Lastly, Emily also says control points are kind of nexus points. Basically, parts of the oldest house where the energy of the oldest house is like the strongest. But it's unusual for Jesse to be able to travel between them, which literally acknowledges the fast travel between the control points in the game. Speaking of control points, two interesting collectibles comment more on what they may be. One is the board discussing them. The board saying we reach tether through the control points seems to imply that control points are sort of like small parts of the board, and the board sort of puts itself into the oldest house in these small areas. The second collectible is Trench discussing how it took a very long time to stabilize the control points from building shifts, and further alluding to some tragedy that had happened to him.
We discovered we must cleanse control points of all interference. It's my duty as the director, like Northmore before me. I couldn't manage it in my own house, at my home. I'll damn well do it here.
After that, Trench immediately goes off on Darling. Despite the fact that Darling is one of his trusted management team, it shows this sort of skewed perspective of Darling that Trench has.
He's wrong about everything else. Dangerously wrong. Suspiciously wrong. Has he been compromised?
Jesse's new quest is to find Marshall. When it comes to Trench's management team, which finding has been the main goal Jesse has, to also find more about Ordinary, Tomasi was the head of communications and he was turned into a hiss. Darling has been completely missing. Salvador has been missing sometime after the hiss invaded. And Marshall, the head of operations, is actually around. Being head of operations, she means she's the head of everything outside of the Bureau. So Salvador basically handles all the security concerns inside the oldest house, and Marshall is the head of, like, investigating things outside of the oldest house, like AWEs, or like sending men on missions to investigate stuff that the Bureau needs to, contain and cover up and stuff like that. While heading to Marshall's last known location, Jesse can find an X-ray box OOP that's hypnotized a bunch of people and can bound it, now able to make her enemies temporarily fight for her. Marshall is pretty much the only lead Jesse can find that has info on Dylan, and follows her into the research sector, where an introduction video to both Darling and the sector is played. Jesse finds Marshall, who's rather unfazed to learn that Trench is dead and Jesse's the new director. She reveals Trench's first name as well. Marshall is trying to secure the HRA lab to make more HRAs. After solving a puzzle with some really weird-ass symbols and turning on the machine, the prism in the machine shatters. And the prism is like the only thing in the machine, so we kind of need it. Prism was a material called Black Rock, produced in the oldest house, and can be found in an area called Black Rock Processing. Jesse asks Marshall about Dylan, but she deflects, saying that they need to get a prism and make HRAs first. A Darling video plays, mentioning the large-scale HRA mentioned before, and Darling says it's there now, for giving a warning, as if he knew about the hiss.
To a different kind of resonance. Hostile, viral, invasive resonance. That's what the Hedron resonance amplifiers are for. Taking the protection Hedron can provide us, and keeping us from being wiped out.
Jesse can find a training obstacle course meant for field agents, but upon successfully completing it, is able to bound a OOP home safe that grants the ability to make a shield in combat. The home safe file is particularly interesting. It was discovered by the FBC after the owner tried to blow it open with explosives, which failed, and sometimes blood emerges from around the seams of the door, which is confirmed to not be human blood. X-rays show that there's something alive inside of the safe. To get to Blackrock Processing, Jesse must cross the turbine room and solve another puzzle in the motel, which reveals that the motel can either reverse time or create objects, or maybe both. Finding Arish and his team just before Blackrock Processing, he warns of a hiss monster that attacked his team, and also gives a clue as to where his boss, Salvador, was last seen. Jesse fights the hiss monster Arish was referring to, which is a new enemy type that can turn invisible, and is definitely not incredibly fucking annoying, and finds every prism has been shattered. However, Blackrock comes from a threshold within the oldest house, and it's literally called the Blackrock Quarry. A threshold is basically another dimension that a part of is in the oldest house, and the Blackrock Quarry is able to be stable enough to actually mine the black rock out of the quarry and use it for things inside of the Bureau. Blackrock Processing simply takes the material Blackrock that is mined from this interdimensional threshold and makes the Blackrock into like other tools. Jesse heads to the quarry and with the help of the now revealed Polaris fights the hiss and uses explosives to get a prism. There are some interesting things about the quarry. In the collectible Quarry Worker incident, a quarry worker who had been missing for 2 weeks suddenly turns up in the quarry, being half-starved and mentioning an ancient tree. The note feared the man would never be seen again. The mention of the ancient tree and also the man getting lost in the quarry actually alludes to the Foundation DLC, but for now it seems to imply the quarry may just be more than it seems. Another collectible, Quarry Incident, mentions we should order another expedition to the city. It's not clear exactly what the city means, although at the top of the quarry you can see the horizon of a city, and the city that the collectible refers to may be that, but it's not quite clear what that city is. It probably isn't referring to New York City, which is where the oldest house is. The oldest house is essentially its own separate thing. Like, it's in New York, but it never really does anything with New York City. And we learn that the oldest house is sustainable, like it has its own power grid that's off of the grid of New York and all that stuff. And 2, the word city is capitalized in the document, implying that it's its own kind of location. It may also just be referring to a location from the Foundation DLC. Jesse gives the prism to Marshall, and Marshall confirms that Dylan is indeed the P6 that we had heard about, and finally learns what had happened to him.
Brother is here. He was once known as Prime Candidate 6, codenamed P6. We brought him here after the Ordinary event. He was groomed to be the future director. He had talents far beyond any other candidate in the program.
Of course he did. We found you together. We share a bond. Are you with him now?
So you kidnapped him?
We took him in. Your parents vanished along with every other adult in Ordinary. Eventually, his power changed him. There were casualties. He wasn't fit to be the director.
Did you know about this? Is this why you didn't bring me here sooner? Were you keeping me away?
Where is Dylan?
He's kept in the containment sector, in the Panopticon.
Dylan's experiences during the Prime Candidate program and after when he was held a prisoner can only really be seen in collectibles. In the collectible Dylan Faden Observation, strange behavior is seen in Dylan's typical day, like talking to himself and suddenly becoming upset with seemingly no reason to. The FBC is also unsure if Dylan even sleeps. Dylan must be a YouTube video editor. The collectible Dylan Faden transcript shows what Dylan says when he's seemingly talking to himself. Quote, "You again. I thought I told you to leave me alone. Why are you showing me this? I can't do anything. Can't you see where I am? Why don't you help me get the fuck out of here? You always show me things I can't do anything about. Stop showing me her. I don't care anymore. And I don't care about you. You both left me here to rot. Fuck off, you bitch. I will dig out my own brains if it means getting rid of you. I don't want you here. Get the fucking message. Subject repeated the phrase fuck off numerous times before being sedated. So it's heavily implied that what Dylan was seeing was Polaris, since both Jesse and Dylan had found Polaris during the Ordinary incident, and also in the transcript he mentions that he doesn't want to see her anymore, implying that Polaris is showing Dylan Jesse, and Dylan doesn't want to see her anymore because he doesn't care about Jesse and he thinks Jesse abandoned her. He also mentions it's not the first time Polaris has visited him, so Polaris has kept trying to visit Dylan and give him hope about his sister and, Dylan's current situation, but Dylan just kind of saw it as Jesse and Polaris abandoned me, and it's not just an unfortunate circumstance, they just turned their back on me. The last collectible I want to bring up here is P6 Victim Autopsy, which is an autopsy of what I'm pretty sure is the first person Dylan killed and the casualties Marshall mentioned. While this whole document is just a bunch of medical jargon I mostly don't understand, it does imply the victim was snapped in half while either being shoved or pulled through an object, which just gives you an idea of Dylan's sort of violent tendencies and powers. Our next objective is to get to the containment sector, where Dylan is held. However, we can also talk to Emily about some more aspects of the Hiss resonance in blood, and if being corrupted by the Hiss can be reversed.
I've been attempting to isolate and neutralize the Hiss resonance in blood samples, but no luck so far.
So you can't reverse it?
Not yet, but perhaps reversing it is too simple. See, if Hiss resonance can rewrite human genetics, then perhaps it's a question of rewriting the Hiss resonance. In theory, that could pave the way for custom human genetic alteration.
When going to containment, Jesse sees that the P6 cell has been breached and fears Dylan being corrupted by the Hiss. And when pulling the light string to go through the motel, Dylan even briefly appears. The containment sector is mainly the Panopticon. At the front of the Panopticon is the Panopticon supervisor, Frederick Langston, and I'll just let him explain what the Panopticon is.
Right. Well, okay. Hello, I'm Frederick Langston, the Panopticon supervisor. It's not the best time for a tour. We have Hiss everywhere, numerous cell breaches, and system failures across the board, but you're the director, so here we go. Founded by Zachariah Trench, the Panopticon is our state-of-the-art repository for all altered items.
I don't have time for this.
I was told Dylan Faden was kept here. Can you help me find him?
Faden? Sure. Darling wanted him somewhere secure and isolated away from people. He's in the maximum security cells, upper level. But there's currently a pressing matter, ma'am. We've got an object of power loose in there. It's wrecking the place. The Benikoff TV, it's a real doozy.
So, yeah, the Panopticon is essentially the most SCP-ass thing, just kind of mashed into one big area. It holds altered items, which are different from objects of power. By the way, Langston is easily the funniest character in this game. This guy's great. Langston can go off about how he feels about working at the FBC.
Do you like working at the FBC?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the drama's a bit much, but I get better benefits here than I would over at the Postal Service. I checked. Better healthcare. That's not to say I don't like my job, ma'am. Been here over 15 years. No one knows the Panopticon collection better than me. I'm, close to them, in a way.
I can't tell if that's creepy or normal here.
He can reveal how he thinks objects have their needs to be met to be kept under control, sort of like people.
How do you keep the altered items under control?
It depends on the item. Each one has different needs. Ritualistic touches go a long way. Singing to them.
Did he say
Flipping
singing?
the lights 3 times, that sort of thing. It's not superstition if it works.
He can talk about what he thought about Trench.
Did you work closely with Trench?
Oh, he spent most of his time with Darling and all them. The inner circle. Not that I care.
Trench certainly had his favorites.
He did stop in occasionally to scowl and smoke. Did you know the Bureau has a no-smoking policy? It does. Just not for Trench. Still, he is the one who put aside funding for the Panopticon. The man did have vision.
He also gives what is definitely the weirdest and most confusing, but also the greatest explanation for the differences between objects of power and altered items.
What's the difference between objects of power and altered items?
Think of them like storms. Objects of power are like tropical cyclones or hurricanes for the uneducated. They're big, rare, and scary. Of course, directors can just bind the OOP and become the eye of the storm. Altered items are more like weird thunderstorms. Some may rain frogs, some may rain corn, but they all rain something.
And how does the hiss factor into all that?
It's changing them, making them aggressive. Now they're all raining, I don't know, knives. Knife rain.
Great character. We need a Langston spinoff. You hear me, Remedy? Unfortunately, we have to leave Langston for now. We can also hear a message from Trench about the Panopticon, and he presents a very interesting idea as to why altered items may be altered.
Altered items. We've found many. They appear mundane, but nothing could be further from the truth. They're all powerful, dangerous. They press heavy on our minds because that's their nature. They've been altered because we can't stop thinking about them. We put them on altars because they're used to being worshipped. This keeps them calm. We contain them, but they don't want to be controlled. We study them to discover what makes them tick.
Jesse fights the second story boss, a hiss-corrupted Salvador, and actually kills this one. She bounds the TV to control it, which also lets her levitate. Now Jesse can enter Dylan's cell, but find it's been totaled, and Dylan isn't even there. Emily calls the cell, revealing where Dylan now is.
He's gone. Dylan isn't here. He might be nearby. Or maybe the hiss got to him. I don't know.
Jesse, listen. Dylan's here. With us. He just walked in. He says he is giving himself up. He's been affected by the hiss, but he is different than the others. We must isolate him.
On the wall of Dylan's cell is Jesse, written in blood, implying Dylan somehow knows that Jesse is in the Bureau, even though, up until he escaped, he was just in the cell. Returning to Central Executive, we can get dialogue from all characters. Arish, interestingly enough, explains the difference between his sector, which is security, and Marshall's sector, which are, as I said before, operations and rangers.
Not often. Rangers are specially trained in threshold reconnaissance and ground zero AWE response. Security is more interested in the dangers inside the Bureau.
They must see some weird stuff out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, every week they are tackling things that were previously unknown to the human experience. Most Rangers, they retire due to cognitive collapse. I looked up the medical definition. Not fun.
Him also mentioning that a lot of Rangers leave because of cognitive collapse is somewhat similar to what is known as a cognitohazard. Basically, cognitive collapse implies that what the Rangers constantly see or experience or have to deal with slowly erodes what they understand about the world, since, they're constantly dealing with supernatural shit that is just hard to understand, and sometimes the Bureau doesn't even know about all these things, and the Rangers are basically the first people that have to find out about it. A cognitohazard is an idea brought up in SCP, although it's not totally limited to it. It's basically the idea that something supernatural can harm you simply through one of your senses. So if you see a picture that's considered a cognitohazard, then that picture makes you go insane, even though all you did was see it. Or if you see the picture, you can get killed, or something else that's horrible. A popular example of this is SCP-2316, known as You Do Not Recognize the Bodies in the Water, which is an entity that tries to trick you into thinking corpses in water are people you know, and it does this if you look at the bodies. What's also similar to this is an infohazard, which gives the same dangerous effect as a cognitohazard, but the dangerous effects come from knowing about a concept. A good example of this is Rocco's Basilisk, which is a whole rabbit hole I don't want to get into. There was a very good video by Wendigoon on it, but it's the idea that if I just told you what something is, even if you have nothing to do with the information, you have no way to use it, you'd be in danger by knowing it. It's implied, at least to me, that this cognitive collapse is kind of what Arish is referring to. both cognito and info hazards. I may also just be looking into it too much, but lastly, speaking of Marshall, Arish comments on her having some strange habits. This brings up the fact that Marshall has seemingly disappeared and can't be found anymore in the main game.
Rangers could not ask for a better leader. She's a little, intense, but given the stuff she's seen, I'm not surprised. She does have a bad habit of disappearing, though.
Where does she go?
Last time she vanished, I did some digging into the security logs. I found camera footage of her entering the quarry. She was down there alone for days. Now, typically that's not allowed, but Marshall is kind of above the rules.
I wonder what she finds so interesting in the quarry.
But it alludes to where her whereabouts are, which are revealed in the Foundation DLC. Emily is uncertain if the powers Jesse and Dylan both have is from Polaris or from some kind of genetics, but regardless, Jesse finally reunites with Dylan, put in a special HRA cage due to being corrupted by Hiss, but he's completely different from every other Hiss-corrupted person because he can talk. He levitates like, a bunch of the Hiss-corrupted people in and around the game do, and he also says the Hiss incantation. I guess I didn't mention this. The Hiss corrupted, levitating people chant an incantation. I'll get more into that later, but they chant some weird shit. In general, Dylan is a weird fucking guy. Probably a combination of being isolated in the Bureau and thinking his sister had abandoned him, as well as being corrupted by the Hiss. He speaks in third person, calling himself not Dylan, and referring to himself as P6.
You are Dylan Faden's sister.
He's talking in the third person. Always a good sign.
Do you know who you are?
Not Dylan. Trench and Darling made sure of that. I'm P6. P6. But I'm better now. The Hiss made me better. Push the fingers through the surface into the wet. You've always been the new you. You want this to be true.
Can you stop that? Please?
Not exactly the reunion I'd hoped for.
It feels good to say those words. I want to say them. They sound good.
It's implied this broken identity is from him being locked inside of the Bureau for so long. He also comments on Polaris and not helping him when he was taken away, as well as alluding to where the Hiss came from.
She didn't help when they locked me up for years. After the song time for applause, we build you till nothing remains. The air cracks and the truth will emerge out of you. You are home. The Bureau brought the slide projector back here with me. And the Bureau did what the Bureau does. They used it. And they found... They opened the door up to the Hiss. That's the only thing I can thank them for.
Although he seemingly intentionally doesn't say who turned the slide projector on, Dylan says he let the Hiss get into himself to get rid of Polaris, and that Polaris and the Bureau is using Jesse, and urges her to go to the Prime Candidate program to find out more about Dylan's captivity and grooming to become the next director. Here we get a lot of optional dialogue from Dylan. That sounds like it's a bunch of random and incoherent rambling, but actually sets up a lot of interesting aspects within the lore of both Control and the grand lore of Alan Wake. If we choose to talk to him once, he talks about a dream he had.
I'd like to tell you about a dream I had last night.
Off to a good start.
Okay. I'm listening.
I was back in Ordinary before all of this happened. But in the dream, I was alone. It was just me. I was the only child. A girl. My name was Jesse Dylan Faden. But then the Bureau came and caught me, brought me back here, locked me up. Have you ever noticed that our names, Jesse, Dylan, they could be girls' names, boys' names, could be anything. Don't you find that weird? I find that weird.
Although it sounds like it's complete weird nonsense, I think him saying he was Jesse Dylan Faden is that, in Dylan's perspective, both Jesse and Dylan are sort of the same. Like, both are being used by forces they can't control. For Dylan, he was being used by the Bureau, and now he's used by the Hiss. And for Jesse, she was used by Polaris. I think this could also mean that Dylan could have easily been the one to escape the Bureau and Ordinary, and Jesse could have been the one captured. Basically referring to the fact that the two are sort of interchangeable, and if Dylan and Jesse had simply swapped positions, then Dylan would be the one trying to save Jesse, and Jesse would be the one going insane. Jesse can talk to Dylan a second time, and he can talk about a set of dreams he had. One where Jesse works in the Bureau doing random menial tasks.
I was going to be the new director of this place. I helped you get a job here so that we could be together. You were an office assistant. You'd make coffee and deliver the mail, and there was always plenty of work to do. And it stayed that way, forever and ever. It was nice.
Foreshadowing is a narrative
Dylan mentions another dream that breaks the fourth wall.
The dream shifted, and none of it was real anymore. It was a game. We were in a game, and it was a fucking boring game. But you couldn't stop playing.
After that, there's another dream that becomes a musical.
Or maybe it was another dream already. Or maybe I'm just confusing them. But in this other dream, it was more like a musical. This is an ordinary song about an ordinary girl from an ordinary town. It's the ordinary story. She worked an ordinary job in an ordinary office. And something. And that's all I can remember of that dream.
Maybe that's for the best.
If we talk to Dylan a third time, he talks about a dream where the Hiss becomes free, and a Hiss-corrupted Dylan meets the President to help spread the Hiss. If we talk to Dylan a fourth time, he mentions possibly the weirdest dream.
I was in a dark place, and there was a dark man there. His name was Mr. Door, and he told me that there are many worlds, side by side, on top of each other, some inside of others. In one world, there was a writer who wrote a story about a cop. In another world, the cop was real. Door said he himself was in all of them at the same time, endlessly shifting between them. I asked him how I could reach these worlds. I wanted to bring the Hiss there. But he didn't want to help me. He didn't like the idea.
It's not relevant now, but the Mr. Door that Dylan mentions becomes a very important figure later in the lore, but it is after this game, so just letting you know. Just thought I should mention that. Basically, all you need to know now is Mr. Door is this kind of entity that can shift through infinite dimensions, but it's unknown what his motives are or why. Dylan also references Alan Wake by mentioning the world with a writer who wrote the story of a cop, and another where the cop was real, essentially suggesting Alan Wake's cop character, Alex Casey, may have been created by Alan. If Jesse talks to Dylan a fifth and final time, he again breaks the fourth wall by acknowledging the scene itself.
In fact, I'm having a dream right now.
Oh, that's new.
In this dream, I'm standing in the corner watching Jesse and Dylan talk about this very dream. This very dream! He said just now! and repeated it again now. I'm standing there and watching, and that's all I can do. It's as if I'm trapped there. And that's all I have to say about that dream.
Okay, Dylan.
This is gonna sound weird, but because in all of that optional dialogue, Dylan breaks the fourth wall at least twice, it kind of seems like doing that is one of Dylan's powers or abilities. Like he's aware of sort of the reality they're in, is at least the impression I got by the fact that he was able to break the fourth wall and be meta twice. But it's not clear if that ability is because of the hiss, or because of his powers, or because he has these vivid dreams. Once Jessie enters the Prime Candidate program, she discovers a room called P7, and that she was P7. Although Jessie was not a prisoner to the Bureau itself, she was constantly monitored and watched by them. The Bureau even able to obtain recordings of Jessie's therapy sessions, which is definitely not creepy at all, and I will get into them later. This also links back to the brief Jessie-Dylan Faden scene, the fact that both of them were kind of prisoners of the Bureau, to be used for the Bureau's goals in some way, but just in different cells. Jessie even finds a mock-up transit system in the form of the NYC subway, although I don't think it has the accurate amount of piss in it, and realizes she's figuratively going home before discovering a mock-up of the entire town of Ordinary, including her own house. Jessie reveals that the slide projector her and Dylan found was actually found in the dump outside of town, and then finds the Bureau moved the entire dump into the oldest house, and a lab right at the site. Jessie finds a Dr. Darling video that points to where she has to go next.
Effective immediately. I'm setting up a new department. Dimensional research in the research sector. Transferring the slide projector there. That's where my focus will be now. The Ordinary site remains as is. We'll be back to... I don't know when.
Darling took the projector to the research sector. He dedicated a whole area to it, so he knew it was important. Dimensional research. That's where we go next.
To get into dimensional research and find the projector, Jessie has to cross what's known as the Ashtray Maze, an impossibly changing labyrinth. Upon attempting to get through, a message from the janitor Ati says that the maze is broken, and whoever wants to get through it needs to find him. The ashtray and cigarette file shows the maze comes from the ashtray, which is an OOP. There's a maze engraved on the bottom of the ashtray. Whoever is bound to the OOP can create a shifting maze, and it was last bound to Trench, but since Trench is dead, that's likely why the maze is broken. Several people have gone missing inside the maze and are presumed to be lost. Trench further explains being bound to the ashtray and cigarette and how to cross the maze.
I'm averse to using objects of power. I don't want to lean on things I ultimately can't trust. But the ashtray and the cigarette, smoking there forever, have their uses. The ashtray maze they conjure is an impossibly changing labyrinth that no one but the Binder, and those the Binder invites, can ever pass through. The things we hid in dimensional research, the things Darling studies, the danger and the risk involved, call for every measure of security and protection I could bring to the table. The maze, hands down, is our strongest lock. I gave Darling and his chosen crew license to pass through the maze. Lately, I've started to think I should revoke that license.
Jessie finds a light switch in maintenance that wasn't there previously, and crosses the motel, having to get rid of the goddamn clock again because it decided to find its way into the motel. Instead of entering the Black Pyramid door like every other motel section, Jessie enters the janitor door, which is a small thing that shows Ahti's power goes as far as being able to change the motel, and you never enter any other different door besides the Black Pyramid door and the janitor door through the entire game. So a power being able to sort of dictate the motel must be pretty fucking powerful. Through the door you end up in the quarry, but you're now able to enter a restricted section not even shown on the map. As Jesse follows Ahti's trail, visions of a bright light and a beach appear, related to Ahti saying he wanted to go on vacation earlier. What's interesting is that the bright light, like visions and images, sort of guide Jesse on where to go in a similar way that Polaris does. So it implies to me anyway, Ahti has like the same amount of power as this deity Polaris, and is able to sort of tell or point out like locations to someone and sort of guide them using that. The restricted area leads to a place literally called Nowhere, and it's seemingly just endless void full of dark pillars and fog. It's so big you need a fucking Skytram to get across it. This is called the Foundation, and it's really only important in the Foundation DLC, but the board does say something interesting about it, calling the oldest house a tree, and the Foundation is the base. This is related to that quarry worker who got lost and also mumbled something about an ancient tree when he was found in the quarry. As Jesse enters the nothingness, she hears more of Ahti speaking Finnish and visions of his vacation. Ahti appears and gives Jesse a cassette player.
Did you have peace in your song?
Yes.
No. Bark don't make a wound.
You did good. Take my cassette player. You can borrow it. The song is a present from my friends to you. It will get you through the maze so you can do your job.
The brand of the cassette player being Pony, which is a reference to Sony. Entering Dimensional Research pretty much triggers the last 2 missions of the campaign, so before we do that, we should catch up with the characters some more. Langston says other people in the Bureau have powers, but it's nothing like Jesse's, and comments on how secretive Darling was about Dylan.
Fine.
We have some paranaturally inclined agents at the Bureau. Nothing as impressive as you, though. Of course, we did have your brother here. He got a special cell up top. Darling put his own people in charge. Like I couldn't be trusted. I couldn't even get into the room. In my own Panopticon. I tell you, the way that Darling runs things, there ought to be an investigation. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Don't worry about it.
Langston also says he knows nothing about the slide projector, but only that Trench and his chosen few do. Emily also gives insight into how Darling treated her, or at least used to treat her, but how this devolved into him being very secretive.
Out of college, he actually came to visit. He interrupted my physics course by shouting, "Not quite, Professor," and then marching down to the front of the class where he proceeded to berate the very idea of laws of thermodynamics. He's been a showboat all his life.
Darling visited you in college?
Yeah, he read a paper I'd published, came to recruit me for the Bureau. I accepted and then spent years waiting for access to the confidential research that Darling promised me. And whenever I ask about my access level, he just mumbles that it's temporarily postponed and then changes the subject to the effect of entropy on luck.
I wonder who else Darling had his work from. Marshall? Trench?
Re-entering the Ashtray Maze, the song is revealed to be a song from the Old Gods of Asgard, the fictional in-universe band that appeared in Alan Wake 1. This part kicks so much ass. The song is great, it really shows Remedy trying to experiment more with surreal sections with great music, and if you know anything about Alan Wake 2, that only happens more. It was also foreshadowed by Dylan mentioning the dream that had become a musical. Unfortunately, the best part of the game does end, and we find that Dimensional Research has an entire slide projector section and Hedron Resonance Lab. The section is flooded with a strange red sand, and Jesse sees vision of where she and Dylan originally found Polaris, which is a land of 5 dark, tall pillars in the same red sand. The Bureau calls this land Slidescape 36, due to the slide having the number 36 printed on it. The Bureau had obviously opened the door and made a mess of the sand spilling into the oldest house. Darling even writes a very aggressive note, which is strangely unlike him, in a collectible called Sand Memo, and he insists that no one touches the sand in this section and threatens anybody's career if they do. Jesse finds a room dedicated solely to the projector, but the projector is still missing. And there's only a video from Darling about the Bureau's third expedition into Slidescape 36 and what they found. Trench also mentions how the expeditions were dangerous, how several died, and the ones that didn't were affected in some way. But most importantly, he talks about what happened to him on the expedition.
But I did find my meaning in that desert. A sound, like a needle drilling in, cutting through the containment suit, reverberating on the base of my skull. My whole being. Darling said it was nothing. But he was wrong. It's been there ever since. Growing into a certainty, into an understanding of what's at stake here, what kind of a threat we're facing, and what must be done to stop it.
Entering the Hedron chamber, which is locked with the large HRA Darling had previously mentioned, lies a gigantic metal object. It's important to note that this is not Hedron itself, rather the cage that holds Hedron, which is some sort of entity that we never actually see in the game. It's also important to note that although the game makes it seem like Polaris and Hedron are the same, at least in this scene, they are not. Polaris and Hedron are two separate entities. Polaris had either used Hedron or was being passed sort of through Hedron into Jesse and Dylan, upon Jesse and Dylan finding Hedron. Regardless, the fact that the Bureau bought this goddamn gigantic thing that holds an unknowable entity into the oldest house is kind of a big deal. Dylan even briefly appears before the Hiss attack, trying to use siphons on Hedron. Jesse destroys all 6 siphons, but this seems to fail, as the Hedron cage breaks open and falls. Jesse, believing that Polaris is dead, since Polaris comes from Hedron, is trying to fight off the Hiss corruption before it seemingly takes her. And then the credits roll. This is obviously a fake credit scene. If the weird-ass warped music and the fact that the credits become this jumbled, massive text. That say some of the same lines from the Hiss incantation, this kicks off the very final campaign mission, called Take Control, which is the same name as the Old God song earlier. Jesse is now an office assistant in the executive sector, doing menial bullshit tasks. Hey, there's that foreshadowing I mentioned again. I knew it would come back. Characters such as Arish, Langston, Pope, and various other voices can be heard saying cliché office jargon and insulting Jesse. After doing enough pointless tasks that literally never end, a mail tube comes in to be delivered to the director. On the way to the office, Ahti says to Jesse that she can find herself in the director's office. Upon delivering the mail and taking the outgoing mail, Jesse sees herself in the director's chair, as Dylan points the service weapon at her and shoots her. Jesse says she can't feel Polaris anymore, still thinking Polaris is dead. Jesse is back doing her horrible 9-to-5, probably a totally painful 401k and pension, but can head back to the director's office, with Ahti encouraging her and saying she's getting closer. Jesse is told off by Trench, and several people corrupted by Hiss can be seen in the office. Trench has a lot of paranoid rambling that just sounds like nonsense, but if you sit and listen to all of it, and it is a lot, he actually ends up revealing what is going to be revealed soon in the story anyway. Trench was infected by the Hiss during the third Slidescape expedition, which is the thing he explained felt go into his ear. We're not told exactly when that expedition was or how long he was corrupted, but it's implied the Hiss sort of corrupted him and worked at his paranoia for years. With his paranoia and his sort of growing need for control over the Bureau, he had come to believe that Hedron was actually the danger, and Darling was going to bring in Hedron and it was going to infect the whole Bureau. So, believing that Hedron was bad and Darling has infected the whole Bureau with the HRAs that Darling had made and given out to everyone, Trench had tried to stop by ordering the HRAs to not be worn. Of course, that didn't work, so he had believed the Bureau just was infected, and the Hiss had basically warped his mind, and in this delusion, it was revealed he had let the Hiss in.
The nostalgia department. I have my own slide for the projector. I took it. A memento. In ordinary. After the girl burned them. It's burnt, but it'll work. The Hiss will save us all.
Him saying that girl burned them is referring to Jessie, obviously, and reveals that she had burned all of the slides except for Slidescape 36. Trench had opened the Slidescape to let the Hiss in and take out Hedron. Trench also talks about Ahti, which is unrelated to everything else, but he does note that Ahti has a strange presence, again alluding to the fact that Ahti gives off much more than he appears to be as just a simple janitor. Jessie sees Dylan point the service weapon at Trench, revealing everything Trench had already said if we stayed and listened to him about Trench being infected first and letting the Hiss in. Dylan shoots Trench, which match cuts with Jessie being shot and Dylan pointing a finger gun at himself while sitting in the director's chair, likely implying a Hiss-corrupted Dylan wants to take over the Bureau and spread the Hiss like he mentioned earlier. This match cut of like Jessie and Dylan Faden both in the chair, both being like shot in similar imagery, is also a reference to the Jessie Dylan Faden line and how it seems like they could be sort of interchangeable or like they're sort of connected through Polaris, but also through the fact that they had basically become like total opposites. Back in the workroom, we can see the Hiss corrupting more of this really weird nightmare. And if Jessie goes to the director's office a third and final time, she shoots Trench with the service weapon and sits in the director's chair, proclaiming herself the director. She gets a hotline call from Darling, which is one of only 2 times Darling sort of talks to Jessie in the game.
Hello, this is Dr. Casper Darling. I have a classified message for the director of the Federal Bureau of Control. I have sad news. Hedron is gone now, but it was not a source. It was a catalyst. Do you understand? You must go to my office, the Endgame. It will be revealed.
Jessie enters his office and goes through the motel, seeing Darling's final message to Jessie in the form of a music video to the song Dynamite.
But she turned up just the same. There was a knock on the door, a thump on the floor, and the party turned insane as she called out her name. And she walked in looking like dynamite. She said, now come along and boogaloo through the night. And by the way she's moving, well, dynamite. Might she not, with all she's got the whole town lighting up dynamite. Nobody quite knowing what to do, wrong or right, but they all know Jessie is dynamite. They're right.
This is so weird.
Literally encouraging Jessie to keep going. I love the idea that they get Matthew Peretta in, and they're filming him with they're really filming him. The Darling videos are live action, so they have him be this like erratic, strange, eccentric scientist in live action, and then I'd like to imagine after filming that, Matthew was like, okay, so we're wrapped, and Samuel Lake was like Well, one more. And of course, it's the greatest video in the game. The man even uses the hotline as a prop, and they literally say no one else except the director can use the hotline. To be fair, it's unclear if Darling, like, genuinely managed to sort of make this video from wherever it is he is, or if this is, like, some construction of Jessie's mind, since this is sort of a dream happening in her mind. But I, and pretty much all of the fandom, would like to believe Darling somehow made this video, because that's just funny. Jessie enters a door with a picture on it and sees herself floating, with her voice and another, which is implied to be Polaris's voice, saying the hiss incantation.
Grow brighter. Around one constant, they revolve.
Jessie understands that while Hedron is dead, Polaris isn't, and Jessie sort of embodies Polaris, at least in a sense. They're sort of connected. Sort of how Polaris was connected to Hedron, Polaris is also connected to Jessie, and by extension, Polaris would be connected to Dylan as well. Jessie sees that she still has the ability to stop Dylan, but he turned on the projector in the nostalgia department just like Trench did. As she nears Dylan and fights waves and waves of enemies, she reaches Dylan and tries to cleanse him. It's unknown if it works or not. The last time she tried to cleanse like a hiss-corrupted person, the person just like fizzled. But Dylan is in a coma, so it's not like he just fizzled away, but it's unknown if he'll wake up. Emily says there's no trace of the hiss in Dylan anymore, and the hiss did affect his body and possibly his mind. While Jessie did close the projector portal, the hiss is still in the oldest house, which means the lockdown can't be lifted at that point in time. Jessie accepts the task of vanquishing the hiss, as she has accepted being the director, and declares she won't operate the Bureau like Trench and Darling, with both of them being gone. I will admit, although I do really enjoy the plot and just general setting, and the characters are all super interesting, the one complaint I had is that the last mission is unfortunately a bit underwhelming, just because I wish there was more of like a final boss. It's more of just you fight a lot of enemies and you get to Dylan, and like that's cool. It's a big story moment, obviously, but I do wish there was more of a final boss. Because the story only has, I believe, 2 bosses, which is Tomasi and Salvador, and you don't even kill Tomasi. There are better bosses in like the side content, but I wish that it just had some form of like a final boss. It would feel more, I think, satisfying. In terms of wrapping up all of the characters, Jessie makes Emily the head of research, which she of course accepts, and Emily also comments that when Hedron quote-unquote died, the HRAs had failed, and the hiss had begun infecting everyone until the hiss was pushed back, and that Jessie has become the source of power for the HRAs. Essentially what I was saying, how Polaris was sort of reaching through Hedron, Polaris is now able to reach through Jessie, and Polaris is not dead. Just because Hedron happened to be destroyed. Emily also says it's unknown why the hiss want to infect the board, but that strangely any data on the board has been deleted or never recorded. It can be assumed that the hiss was trying to take the board to spread, especially since Dylan talks about how he wants to spread the hiss, but we're never quite certain of the hiss's goals in the game, and to be honest, we still aren't, so yeah, I guess that's up to interpretation. Arish is glad that the research sector won't be secretive and wants to make wearing HRAs mandatory. He also said Salvador, the corrupted hiss boss in front of the TV that I mentioned, likely never even knew about the slide projector, which is kind of strange because we were told that Trench's select team knew about the slide projector. Maybe it was like a different select team. Maybe it was only the research people like Darling and some scientists and research. It's possible that since this shows that Trench was manipulated by the hiss into distrusting Darling, which you can tell through collectibles and character dialogue that Trench and Darling had a sort of tension between them near Trench's death, and I guess that goes as far as to say that Trench distrusted his entire team, which he probably did because the hiss did corrupt his mind. So yeah, Arish also does mention Marshall's last seen whereabouts, which again is a setup to a DLC.
So I was in maintenance when I was leading the Rangers out of the Atlas. Yeah, I told her it wasn't safe, but She said she had to go check on something.
Did you ask where she was going?
Whew. Marshall is not the kind of person you question. Kind of intimidating, you know? But, she was by herself, if that helps at all.
Not really, but thanks. Hopefully she turns up.
As for the board, they sign off with 2 messages. One called the Directorship has the board break the 4th wall by directly mentioning the game, the fact that both the board and Dylan were able to break the 4th wall and sort of talk to the player. The board also breaks the 4th wall more than once, implies that both the board and the hiss are sort of powerful enough to kind of see beyond the reality that is the game. And in the message, the future, they say, we will speak again in the future / expansion. Again, also a 4th wall break, but also setting up that, yes, the board is a pretty major part of the Foundation DLC. And that is the entire main story of Control. But there's still a lot in this game. I touched on a few lore concepts and ideas and story themes that were brought up, but I didn't go like too far into depth, which I really want to do now. I don't worry, I will sort of give my analysis on what the game and the characters sort of represent. This isn't just a video of me summarizing everything. I don't want it to just be that. I want to sort of show my, first of all, massive amount of research, because I read literally every collectible in this game, and there's way too many, but also show what I kind of think and how I apply what I think to the grand scheme of what I think the story's trying to tell. There are also several side quests that expand the world of Control in the Oldest House, and I'm not going to talk about every single side quest or every single collectible, because A, we would be here literally all day, and B, not every collectible is really that interesting or adds a lot, and that goes the same thing with the side quests. So I'm going to talk about the stuff that I'm able to sort of tie threads to stories the most, or I just think are the most interesting. There's a lot of stuff I intentionally did not bring up while covering the main story, like things I didn't bring up or things I just kind of glossed over, because I didn't want to just throw a bunch of things at you and like terms that don't really make sense. But this is the section where I will go in depth in lore to all of that stuff. So strap in, because this will be on the test. To begin with, though, and I'll start off real small and easy. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this name. Dr. Yoshimi Takyui's Guided Imagery Experience. I'm sorry in advance. This quest and the collectible that accompanies it used to be solely a PS exclusive until it was moved to all platforms of the game on the Ultimate Edition. Jesse can find a guided imagery tape from a Dr. Yoshimi Takyui, and upon finding the sensory tank room that is dedicated to listening to these kinds of tapes, Takyui, a Japanese man whose narration is translated, describes a beach setting with trees on the ocean, and the trees are taught to love by Jesse and protected by very evil forklifts. The tape is obviously really weird and doesn't really have a discernible lesson or takeaway, but it's like just parodying those cliche, dumb sensory tapes that are supposed to sound smart. Despite its seeming pointless, Jesse feels great after it and wants to find another. You can find a second tape, this one called Embracing the Erratic. This one also describes a beach setting, but it's now deserted, with Jessie chasing after a runaway vending machine to get her favorite soda, only to be given a different soda, and that one becomes her favorite, with the lesson being more cheesy feel-good. Jesse then touches a dead body that suddenly appears and has to bury a dozen more. Quite a tone change there, with this lesson not feeling as good. The quest ends there, but in the document collectible Dr. Takyui Investigation, it reveals that Takyui doesn't work in the Bureau, and he's just some dude in Tokyo, but his guided imagery experience tapes have made him quickly famous, and the Bureau investigated him due to his sudden popularity. Agents went to a signing and reported hearing something when Takyui spoke, implying that Takyui's voice or words that he uses literally has some sort of supernatural effect. The Bureau recorded and analyzed his voice and is even considering him as a prime candidate. Although considering the fact that I became the director, that's probably not happening. So if you're like me, you are probably thinking, that quest was fucking weird. What was the point of it being a PS exclusive in the past? It's because, and listen to this, Dr. Takyui is voiced by the man himself, Hideo Kojima. It's hard to tell since I don't know Japanese and a translator speaks over him, but he is credited as the voice, and he did lend his voice, and he did this because this was a crossover for Sam Lake and Hideo Kojima's games, since Sam Lake's likeness is a character in Death Stranding, and both Death Stranding and Control came out at roughly the same time. So that's why this quest used to be exclusive. It's because of Feet Man Kojima, and I thought that was funny. In the quest, A Matter of Time, Jesse can find a wounded ranger, Horowitz, who explains him and his squad were chasing an escaped altered item that went into the clocks, which is the sealed-off threshold in the oldest house, literally flooded with clocks. Horowitz asks Jesse to find one of the other squad mates, Wells, that was left behind. Jesse finds Wells, who stayed back in an attempt to save the other rangers, but failed, and he explains how a fuck ton of clocks got into the oldest house.
Threshold effect. This used to be a regular office wing before the threshold manifested. The forces at play in there got a hold of someone's old clock and started duplicating it.
He also says the altered item they were looking for is called the Anchor. Once Wells is brought back to Horowitz, Wells and Jesse must fight a hiss-corrupted Horowitz before Jesse tells Wells to go to Executive and meet the rest of the survivors. This unlocks the next and last quest in this small quest line, The Enemy Within. Jesse chases after and finds the Anchor, which is a literal ship anchor that can spew more clocks, and defeat it. Defeating it is the end of the quest, but we can learn more about the Anchor itself in collectibles. In Anchor Procedures, it's stated it's not known why the Anchor generates that weird-ass sphere, and also cites an experiment with the Anchor gone awry. Quote, May 25th, 1983. Ranger First Class was dropped into the sphere wearing a diving suit with dedicated oxygen line at AM EST. After 10 minutes and 13 seconds inside the sphere, Did's oxygen line was cut at the sphere's border by an unseen force. All agents in the room during Did's entry into the sphere experienced vomiting, vertigo, and loss of fingernails within an hour of one another. Ranger has been declared MIA, presumed dead. In the collectible Anchor supplement, it gives the Anchor's origins, and that it was an anchor on a perfectly normal ship that suddenly sank due to losing structural integrity suddenly within minutes, destroying the entire ship except for the anchor, and the ship's crew said that the sphere the anchor makes became attached to the anchor. One of my favorite side quests and lore that it added is self-reflection. Jesse can find an altered item mirror that's kept in research instead of containment behind a locked door that can only be opened by solving a special puzzle. Entering the mirror, it reveals it literally mirrors the world around it, and Jesse has to fight a mirrored version of herself before cleansing the mirror. This is literally the character but evil version trope done because of a supernatural mirror, but it was pretty cool because the mirrored version of Jesse genuinely uses moves that Jesse uses, and I thought, at least in my opinion, the mirrored version of Jesse fought me using a similar playstyle to how I played, which I just thought was cool. In Mirror Containment, it reveals the mirror does not perfectly reflect the world, and a popular theory is that the mirror has a goal to reflect the world it wishes was real. In Mirror Supplement, the origins of the mirror are given. It was owned by a woman, Mrs. Carver, whose name is redacted from the document all but once, and that she was admitted into a mental ward for, quote, mental instability. A note from 1914 from her doctor says, quote, we certify that the case of Mrs. has shown her to be a lunatic under the reasons of hysteria, bad company, and imaginary female trouble. Her fixation with the family looking glass is noteworthy, though not an uncommon matter when considering the female disposition. That's actually pretty accurate for how women were treated. The mirror ain't crazy, bitch. You're crazy. More on this mirror, we have 2 audio recordings, that being Mirror Debrief and a mirrored version of that title. Both recordings are the same interview of a ranger who spent the longest time, that being 3 hours inside of the mirror. In Mirror Debrief, the ranger speaks backwards, and can't be understood in the recording or by the interviewer. But in the flipped version, it's the opposite, where the ranger is heard perfectly, but the interviewer can't be understood. It's unknown what happened to the ranger, if he ever returned to normal, but for the sake of your understanding, I've edited both recordings together, so that way all the dialogue can be understood.
Debrief for Mirror Excursion 7C. Subject is Agent Hardy. Hardy spent approximately 3 hours in the mirror. It's the longest time on record. Can you describe your experience inside, Agent Hardy?
What? I can't understand you. You need to listen. I saw something in there. There is something inside. You need to lock down the mirror.
Agent Hardy is physically healthy. All tests have come back clean. Yet the speech issue has persisted for hours.
Why are you talking like that? What's wrong with you? All of you? There's something in that fucking mirror!
Calm down, Agent. It could be psychosomatic, but the fact that this only occurred after returning from the mirror makes a paranatural explanation more likely. I recommend a battery of tests and a Class Orange quarantine.
And now we have what is probably my favorite side quest in the game. Self-reflection was probably, like, second, but fridge duty is definitely first. It involves, well, a fridge. While Jesse searches the containment sector for Dylan's cell, you can find Philip, a very distressed man who says he's stuck watching an altered item fridge, and that somebody has to constantly watch the fridge, but his shift replacement never showed up, likely due to the Hiss invasion. When Jesse gets Langston to open the cell door, Philip is presumably killed by the fridge once we lose sight of him. Jesse enters the fridge and fights an entity called the Former, who has the same sound effect as the board, but can't be understood by Jesse or even in subtitles. The environment also looks like the astral plane, but without the Black Pyramid. Once defeating it and returning to Langston, he says it's unusual an altered item is connected to the astral plane, since only objective powers are connected to the astral plane, and altered items are just, weird supernatural stuff. Whatever the Former is has to be very, very powerful. Also, this line is pretty funny.
But if you're here, then who's watching the fridge?
This thing was in there. It was huge, had one big eye. Wasn't friendly.
We've been getting reports from the astronauts lately about something fitting that description.
This quest is very much a reference to the very first SCP that started all of the lore, only known as SCP-173. It's this, statue of unknown origin that at least one person always has to look at, and if you break line of sight with it, it will suddenly move to the point where it can snap your neck once it's close. The game combines this SCP and some really interesting game lore. It's implied that the Former used to be a member of the Board. With it being in the astral plane, it sounds like the Board, and its name is literally the Former, as in former member. Although it's unknown exactly what the Former's doing, or why the Former is part of the Board, it is our closest look at whatever entities govern the Board itself. As for background on the fridge, which used to be separate from the Former, in Fridge Summary, it reveals that the fridge was discovered during the collapse of New York City's Grand Central Hotel, which was a real event in 1973 that allegedly happened due to illegal alterations made on a basement-bearing wall, and it had killed 4 people. The document also states a new effect was observed, which confirms that the effect the Former had put upon the fridge is a new effect. Fridge Supplement also gives insight into who owned the fridge in an interview. What's up? It's me in editing. So I forgot to say this when I actually recorded the video, but for the next collectible, there is mention of a young child dying. So skip to the time on screen. I'll put it on screen. Skip to that if you don't want to hear it. Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Interview, November 20th, 1974. Can you tell us why you left your building that day? I was running out to get eggs. There was that corner store on 30th. That's why I left Michael there on his own. Knew I wouldn't be gone long. He was drawing at the table when I left. Had his crayons out. Happy. The building came down when I was a block away. I ran back. Started digging. City workers found Mikey later. Beside the fridge. The drawings hadn't come off. Tons of bricks fall on it, and those drawings are still there? How does that happen? You kept the refrigerator after the accident. Why? It still had his drawings. God must have kept them safe for a reason, right? I'd get home from work and stare at them all night. I was in a bad way back then. Why did you sell the fridge with your son's drawings still on it? They'd gotten stuck to it, or something. I thought about cutting them off those magnets, but maybe it was better I didn't hold on to them, Gotta move on, everyone says. What's my fridge got to do with the building collapse anyhow? This implies his son Michael's soul had became attached to the fridge, or at least attached to the drawings on the fridge, although it's unclear whether or not Michael's soul is still in the fridge after the former took it over, or after Jesse cleansed the fridge. In the board message dissent, the board says we have heard, quote, wrong/fake news, and that the board is fine, referring to the former as a, quote, rebel faction/dissent, but that it's over and Jesse shouldn't worry. Curiously, the final line is, quote, you can hang up now, please, which is written completely different than every other line the board says, which them always using at least 2 words interchangeably in all of their sentences. So this contradiction implies somehow this message is fake, or it's not actually from the board, or it's being manipulated. In the message former, the board says the former is, quote, back/not gone, and that it steals altered items, stating the former is building a competition, and for Jesse to, quote, do not believe/get hyped about the former's lies/ads, we provide/offer better bonus package/health plan. It ends with threatening Jesse if she leaves. That's some pretty good management right there. And that is all of the side quests, well, at least all the ones that I think have the most interest and content that I wanted to talk about. But we are still not done. As I mentioned before, this game is rife with collectibles, and I wouldn't be doing the game or the characters or just the lore justice if I didn't go into all of them. Some of the actual story and characters are contained within these collectibles, and I think they're really interesting. I only mentioned or showed some of them in my plot synopsis. Of course, I will not talk about every single collectible here. We would be here literally all day, and I don't think all of them are that interesting. But I will go over the ones that I think really add the most to the story. I've grouped them here by category, and if I remember, I'll put chapters in the video. So if you don't really care about one category, you can skip to the next. A lot of these collectibles are text, so there will be some reading, so get ready for a bedtime story. The first thing I wanted to mention was the hiss. While obviously I talked about the hiss a little bit, there are some details and more specific collectibles that are worth going over. It's important to note that it's never stated exactly what the hiss's goals are, and while they wanted to infect Jesse and the board, Dylan mentioned wanting to spread the hiss. It can only be inferred that wanting to spread itself over the world is what the hiss wants, and the hiss wanted to take the board because they knew the board was powerful enough to prevent it from spreading. But again, that's sort of my interpretation. In the collectible variance and alteration, it's unknown why some hiss can be very different, and why every hiss enemy isn't just the exact same, or how they sort of became different. As for details about the incantation, the Doc linguistic ability says there's no difference in the chant the floating hiss say and the chant the hiss enemies can be heard saying, and that the purpose of the chant is still unknown. Although Dylan says the incantation makes him feel good, so it's possible the hiss does this as a sort of way of calming itself or calming the people it corrupts. In the Doc speech analysis, it presents the idea of if the chant would be different in a different language, and also adds to what Emily had said about the most used word being want, and that it's usually attributed to the word you. We do learn more about the incantation and the origins of it in the AWE DLC, but again, I won't get into that yet. As for the chant itself, I'll let you listen to the whole thing.
You are warm through time. The thunderstorm distorts you. Happiness comes, white pearls, but yellow and red in the eye. Through a mirror, the inverted is made right. Leave your inside by the door. Push the fingers through the surface into the way. You've always been near you. You want this to be true. We stand around you while you dream. You can almost hear our words, but you forget. This happens more and more now. You gave us the permission and regulation. We wait in the stains. The word that describes this is redacted. Repeat the word, the name of the sound. It resonates in your house. Oh, after the song, time for applause. We build you till there's nothing remains. The egg cracks and the truth will emerge out of you. You are home. You remind us of home. You've taken your boss with you. All hair must be eaten. Under the conceptual reality behind this reality, you must want these waves to drag you away. After the song, time for applause. The cliche is death out of time. Breaking the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth on the floor. No, floor, you fall. How do you stay insane? Hurts to be happy. In your one was a tune you just can't stop humming anymore. dream. Baby, yeah, just plastic, so safe. Nothing to worry about. Funny. The plastic breaks, now the hole in your room is a hole in you. You can't only let you enter the hole in you. You have always been there. The only child. A copy of a copy of a copy. Orange peel. The picture is you holding the picture. When you hear this, you will know that you're in the new you. You want to listen. You want to dream. You want to smile. You want to hurt. You don't want to be.
The incantation is obviously, like, seemingly nonsense, and it even reads like a strange poem because it kind of is one. The sort of short sentences and constant reusing of words and strange imagery evoke this weird poetic nature, but like a weird fucked up poetic nature. Admittedly, I am terrible at poetry or trying to understand poetry. However, this is one of the most up to interpretation aspects on the game, so I will do my best. Some of the incantation refers to things we actually know from the game. The second line is,
"The thunderstorm distorts you,"
referring to the old gods of Asgard, since their names are literally Thor and Odin. It's not clear if the hiss is referring to the band's only song In Control, or another song, or just the band themselves. The hiss describes that it may be able to be everywhere in some capacity, with the line,
"He's standing around you while you dream."
The hiss is sort of aware it's a sound, and a resonance also with the lines,
"The name of the sound, it resonates in your house."
The incantation literally refers to the idea of breaking the fourth wall, and I think it even refers back to Jesse's poster over the hole in the wall metaphor / reference to Shawshank Redemption with this line,
"The hole in your room is a hole in you."
It ends with a list of wants. This implies the hiss is instilling these wants and these ideas into the corrupted and trying to spread them. That's all I can really make sense out of the incantation, besides what's revealed in the DLC, but again, I'm not going to go into that. And I definitely missed some things here, so please let me know your ideas or interpretations. The next category is Northmore, who was the oldest house's director before Trench. We never see or hear from Northmore in the game ourselves, but we sparingly hear about him. Northmore surprisingly does tie into the themes of the game, because the collectible NSC, relating to the NSC power plant that powers the entire Bureau, reveals that Northmore, being one of the most powerful employees ever in the Bureau, had lost control of his supernatural abilities, and reluctantly agreed to being put inside the generator, so his supernatural abilities can at least become power for the Bureau. The power plant is also completely self-sufficient and invisible to the New York City power grid. The name of the power plant also gives this away, since NSC literally stands for Northmore Sarcophagus Container. That's a pretty shitty retirement.
Michael! Don't leave me here!
The Trench message, Northmore, also gives background to Trench becoming the director, and ominously alludes to what happened with Northmore.
For wanted power, I purposefully avoided it. Didn't trust it. Didn't want to rely on it. Northmore was all about power. A man like an explosion, hungry for authority, for order, for more, until it was too much. I had to find a solution in the end. Contain the situation. Northmore never liked me, but he went along with it, to his credit. He didn't really have a choice. I suppose at the end of the day, a director's most basic duty is to keep the lights on. Here's to you, Northmore.
Trench saying a director's most basic duty is to keep the lights on is so chilling, because it's literally referring to Northmore just being locked in the generator and just constantly providing power, and thus he's keeping the lights on. This small background we're given on Northmore relates to the plot of the game, because Northmore had lost control, just like Trench would. Although he didn't lose control to the Hiss or to the Bureau itself, he had lost control of himself. He had lost control of his own actual power, because he was so powerful, and that sort of resigned him to being locked. The game's core theme is trying to have control over places, people, things, or even just yourself, and both Northmore and Trench failed to do so, and that shows a sort of pattern of failure within the Bureau. The next category is also small, and I think this one is genuinely interesting. The Tennyson Report. The Tennyson Report is a single collectible written by, quote, a true believer. It begins with a quote at the top. So sad, so strange, the days that are no more. For years, the Federal Bureau of Control has been wrongfully forcing a philosophy upon itself and its people. This philosophy is known to you all as science. We all realize that the concepts we explore here are mystic ones, with arcane thinking required to understand them. Yet we insist on using words like paranatural and parautilitarian to create the illusion of a scientific structure, a tidy little system. The Bureau is desperate to stand with the close-minded cult of logic and data that has overrun our society. If a thing cannot be quantified, then we dismiss it outright. We live in an age that is openly hostile to faith in the veiled forces governing our reality. I must remain anonymous for fear of reprisal from the anti-esoteric bureaucrats watching us from their plush offices. Those same bureaucrats, Trench and Darling chief among them, have been steering us away from the Bureau's arcane foundations for decades now. It is time we corrected course. If you stand with me, share this message. We are not alone. So basically, the author believes paranatural things or occult things in the world of Control cannot be scientifically quantified, or they can't be seen as like scientific or just easily understood in like a scientific nature. The paranatural things just are the way that they are, and it's a mistake to try and study them or understand them in a very literal sense. I'll get more into who the author is implied to be in a minute, but first there is some reaction from the rest of the Bureau about the report, specifically from Trench. In the note Tea Time, the writer mentions Trench is looking for info on who wrote it, and that the report has a bunch of copies around the office. And in Tennyson Report Warning, there's a note from Arish to the rest of his staff, saying, quote, Trench is on the warpath about this Tennyson Report thing. He wants to know who wrote it, and he wants to know yesterday. Whoever did it is going to get crucified. So Trench, due to his growing paranoia and need for control, became angry at the Tennyson Report because it had berated him and how he runs things. It seems he never found out who wrote it, but there is evidence to suggest it was actually Langston, the guy who runs the Panopticon. For one, some optional dialogue from Langston shows the same mentality and belief that the Tennyson Report had showed. This can also be seen in the collectible Panopticon Methods Proposal, which is definitively written by Langston, and suggests using some sort of system involving praising the altered items, rather than treating them, quote, like prisoners. The final, dot that implies Langston would have written the report is the name of the report, the quote that was right at the top, and something Langston says. The word Tennyson refers to the 1800s poet Alfred Tennyson, so naturally you'd think the quote at the top of the page is a quote from one of his works, which it is. The quote is from a poem called Tears, Idle Tears. The whole poem echoes a sort of similar feeling than the one in the report. It sort of longs for days that have long since passed, implying that Langston wants to go back to the way the Bureau used to operate, where they used to be less scientific and less trying to understand everything and more just using what they have. This is relevant because of dialogue Langston has in the AWE DLC, and this is the only time I'm going to discuss anything from either of the DLCs, and this is not a spoiler for any of the plot in the DLC, it is simply just one small bit of dialogue. In the DLC, at a certain point, Langston will begin rambling for a really, really, really long time, and if you choose to listen to it, most of it is just comedic nonsense, until he mentions his cat.
Too much work to do to focus on those kinds of things. I need to stay focused so I can get my work done and get home to feed Alfred. Of course, can't always make it home for mealtime, so I have my neighbor check in on Alfred at 7 o'clock if I'm not back yet. Anyway, she has a key to my apartment, and she gives Alfred his dinner if I'm not home. I'm gonna have to buy her a nice fruit arrangement as a thank you after this. I'm missing a lot of Alfred's mealtimes.
Considering the fact that the report is named after a poet, the report uses a quote from the poet, and we know Langston likes poetry and named a cat after a poet, it's pretty safe to say he probably wrote the report, which set Trench off in a rage. I think it's interesting to see a sort of different viewpoint from someone in the Bureau, and how that viewpoint completely set Trench off. Even though the Tennyson report was anonymous and Trench never found out who wrote it, at least it seems he never did because no collectible ever mentions that, it was just criticizing, like, hey, maybe Trench and Darling don't run things great. And it just sort of shows how paranoid and off the edge Trench had totally became, that no one can say anything or even try to, like, combat or argue with him. The next collectible category I want to mention is everyone's favorite janitor, Ahti, as well as talk about Ahti a bit more. Ahti helps Jesse out exactly 3 times in the main game, which definitely is not a coincidence, considering that the Bureau itself emphasizes the importance of doing things in threes, like clicking the light switch 3 times whenever you want to enter the motel, and yet we don't know a whole lot about Ahti. He speaks and acts very strangely to the point of going on vacation in the middle of all of this, yet everything from some dialogue to collectibles to just how much he seems to know and how much he helps Jesse implies that he is far more above the Bureau and seems to know more about the Bureau. So, what is he? Well, Ahti seems to be some kind of deity. That's what's implied anyway. He knows pretty much everything there is to know about the oldest house, at least seemingly. His origins or background are never known by anyone, and is able to get around essentially unimpeded, even though the oldest house's lockdown or the hiss would stop any like random person in the Bureau. His name also suggests he's a deity. Ahti is a sea god in Finnish mythology. Ahti is described as a powerful and sometimes mischievous fisherman, and although our Ahti certainly isn't a fisherman, being powerful, knowledgeable, and maybe even mischievous describes him, I would say. So although we cannot find anything certain about exactly what he is, we know he is not human. I mean, that much is clear, and a few collectibles add some details to this very strange character. The collectible called Ahti's Cabin is one of the few picture collectibles in the game, and has some interesting trivia. The item description uses a phrase, I'm gonna butcher this, Lomely Lumps, which is a phrase Ahti even says himself in dialogue. Although it doesn't translate exactly into English, it's Finnish military slang usually used to order conscripts to a weekend leave, or to give well wishes at the beginning of a holiday, and again, Ahti went on vacation. Kasu is also mentioned, and that is just a Finnish word referring to vodka, called Koskenkorva. I also definitely did not say that right. Although the phrase Lomely Lumps is Finnish military slang, I don't think it's implying that Ahti used to be in the military, because, again, Ahti seems to be far older than kind of any of that. I think it's sort of just a reference to the strange words and phrases he uses, and how even in Finnish he uses slang that standard people wouldn't really use. Lastly, the collectible Plant Complaint mentions that Ahti sings to the plants, and the song he sings is also one that can be heard in the game. It's a Finnish song called Sankarian Tango, or Hero's Tango, and it was written by Sam Lake specifically for Control. Ahti's voice actor also sang the whole thing. I won't show you all of the song because it's several minutes long. I will link it in the description though, if you want to take a listen for yourself. I will show you the Finnish lyrics and the translated English lyrics. The translated lyrics describe someone that sounds like Alan Wake, calling him a hero that's stuck under a dark ocean trying to get back to his loved one, but there's never a happy end for him. The song also may reference The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is a book written by Joseph Campbell that details what is known as a hero's journey, which is a common story structure that popular things like Star Wars use, and it could be argued kind of that Alan Wake uses it to an extent, although it's possible the lyric is not referring to that, and I'm just reading into it. The final collectible section within this part of the video I want to talk about is the Ordinary AWE, also known as Jesse and Dylan's backstory. Now, again, we know, like, the general Ordinary AWE details. Jesse and Dylan lived in Ordinary, found a slide projector in the dump of town that opened doorways to other worlds. One of those worlds had Hedron, which had Polaris, which sort of became a part of Jesse and Dylan. but somehow they triggered something that took all of the adults in the town. The Bureau shows up, they take Dylan, they begin to groom him as the, director. They also take the slide projector and the one slide that survived, and they begin researching that. Jessie gets away and she starts looking into the Bureau, and then everything else that happens in the story. The collectibles add more fine details and explain a few more specifics of some of the other worlds Jessie and Dylan had seen and what may have happened to make all of the adults disappear, which I just think is pretty interesting. So there are several collectibles called ordinary AWE stages. I believe there's like 4 or 5. I'm just going to refer to them all as one. I'm not going to say like which specific number had whatever I'm saying from it, just because it makes it faster that way. But yeah, just know that for the next while, I'm pulling from like a set of collectibles. In these collectibles, Dylan is in an interview being held at the Holdest house, and Jessie is at a therapy session, which again the Bureau had gotten recordings of, because that is still not creepy as shit. Both described the very first slide they had seen as being a room with dirty wallpaper and a lot of dolls on the shelf. Jessie called it the, quote, house, and the two would play there in secret. Dylan mentions several other kids went missing, and that's the first time any character mentions kids going missing as well as the adults in the town, and Dylan names a specific kid, Neil, who came to the dump to play. Jessie describes the second slide as being called the Meadow, but was really more of an empty lot with weeds, a shack, and a phone line, which is a large portion of where I live. She said it smelled of flowers and gave strange dreams of everything melting, but when they would leave the slide, they'd see everything around the projector had melted. Neil enjoyed being in the meadow, but was beaten up by another kid, Tom, who had found out about the projector and seemingly took it. Something had happened with Neil, with Dylan saying, quote, "We thought Neil had got lost inside the meadow when Tom changed the slide, but that's not what happened." Dylan also alludes to an incident at school that had happened with a teacher, and Jessie and Dylan had been following Tom and his friends and where they were taking the projector. They find Tom and his friends in a slide called the Temple, but was described as more of a warehouse or a bunker. An entity called the Not Mother lived there with her babies, and was feeding the kids some kind of milk that was turning them into monsters. Seemingly after they were in the temple, Tom and his friends pushed a piano onto the teacher. It had broken her legs, and then they killed her. The police finally showed up, a little bit late for that, and Tom had claimed, quote, the Not Mother would make them all go away. The police had put a curfew on the town because that would definitely solve all of the fucking problems. And Jessie and Dylan's parents questioned both of them about the dump. Jessie says she remembers wanting her parents gone. Quote, like Tom said, in the next morning, pretty much all the adults had just vanished. Although the use of the words pretty much implies some adults maybe survived, but the game never confirms that, and it can be assumed the Not Mother had taken all of the adults and had been turning them into monsters, similar with what she was doing with the kids. Although it's not certain why the Not Mother is doing that, or if it's just because Jessie had thought she wanted them gone, and thus the adults were just gone. Jessie and Dylan managed to get the projector back, despite even more kids turning into monsters. But then Neil shows up, although it's never clear how he managed to escape the meadow without the projector, but he looked like a melted dog. Dylan says, quote, Neil said a lot of times he didn't like being a boy. I think he liked being a dog. It can be assumed he became a dog thing because he had spent so long in the meadow, but since the projector wouldn't turn off, the two changed to a slide called the Hand, aka Slidescape, where Jessie says she, quote, heard her immediately. She promised to help. Referring to finding Polaris for the first time, Jessie goes on to describe this. Quote, we went in and met Polaris. She told us we were special. She made us special. It felt like being born or reborn, the world fading in for the first time. Familiar, but somehow different. Jessie admits she managed to turn off the projector, took all the slides except for Hand, and then burned them. The stage's collectibles end there, so it can be assumed the Bureau had showed up just after that. In the collectible slide projector tests, it reveals that the projector only uses the specific slides that sort of accompany it and not anything else, so it won't use old photos or other slides. It just doesn't do anything. It's not clear if the projector or the slide is the object of power or if it's both. In the collectible Ordinary summary, it mentions that 17 individuals had survived the AWE and were all brought in for tests, but it doesn't specifically state if they were kids or adults. It can also be assumed Jesse and Dylan are in that 17, so I guess 15 other people. In the Ordinary supplement, it says that although the Bureau had the interviews from Dylan and the therapy session recordings from Jesse, and the Ordinary site itself, all of them had conflicting data. Dylan says there were a total of 8 slides. Jesse says there was 9, but the Bureau had found the burnt remains of 6, which would total 7 if you include Hand. Darling had ordered the whole dump to be brought in with the hopes of finding other slides or just altered items, but it seems he never did. It's unclear if there are other slides that were not destroyed. The second last category is Dylan and Jesse's recordings. So while the Ordinary collectibles give the best understanding of the Ordinary AWE, these recordings give light on other aspects of their lives, like what they did after Ordinary. In Dylan evaluation, an evaluation is performed by Carla, who's the woman assistant to Darling. Dylan immediately asks for Darling.
Let's begin then. In a single word, describe the world around you.
Where's Casper?
Dr. Darling is out of the building today.
He's never out. He didn't want to come, did he? He never visits, not since Roberts. Tell Darling it wasn't my fault. I couldn't control it yet, but I can now. I learned. Will you tell him?
The name Roberts seems to be referring to the one agent that Dylan had supposedly unintentionally killed and had that autopsy report that I mentioned earlier. Dylan then describes the world around him and makes a reference to Jesse's poster metaphor from the very beginning.
In a single word, describe the world around you.
A prison. A cold, empty prison. Not even a poster on the wall.
Him using the same metaphor of like the poster on a wall is very interesting. It could just be that maybe that was a metaphor they had heard as kids, or they had seen the Shawshank Redemption like both as kids, but it may also imply they may be like sort of psychically or mentally connected because they had like a similar thought. I just thought it was kind of neat. In the recording Dylan questioning, Dylan talks about Jesse, and that back in Ordinary, Jesse adored him, and Darling even told Dylan when he was first at the FBC, Jesse would come. Dylan's asked why Jesse never came. Dylan now shows his disdain and hate for his sister.
Like I said, I want to talk about Jessie, your sister.
What about her?
I just want to get your perspective. What do you think of her? What kind of person is she? That sort of thing.
I adored my sister. When I was little, I mean, back in Ordinary.
And you don't anymore?
When I first got here, sure. I'd always hoped she'd come too. Find me, to take me home. We went everywhere together. Why should this be any different? Casper said she could come too, to the Bureau, if she wanted to. But she never did.
Why do you think that is?
Because she didn't care about me. She always wanted to be out on her own, seeing the world. She always said so. I guess she got what she wanted.
Great. So she wanted to see the world. Did she ever mention any place in particular?
Why?
We like to ask questions around here, you know that. Any particular cities, towns, landmarks, anything like that?
I don't remember.
What about family friends? Were you close with anyone living outside of Ordinary?
I'm done with this. Tell Casper I want pizza for lunch today.
Dylan, wait. We're not... End of session.
Carla asks if there are any specific cities or towns Jesse would go to, likely for the Bureau's attempts in trying to track down Jesse. In the recording Jesse Therapy Polaris, Jesse's psychiatrist brings up a Thomas Zane poem that other characters in the Remedy universe have quoted, and it's also a lyric in one of the Old God songs, but then reveals a very strange fact about Thomas Zane.
You mentioned a poem last time we talked. By Thomas Zane?
Yes. Beyond the shadow you settle for, there's a miracle illuminated.
I looked the poem up. Only I couldn't find any poet by that name. I did find a European filmmaker who moved here in the 60s, named Thomas Zane.
What? I don't...
No matter. It suits you very well. The poem. How you see things. Maybe you wrote it yourself?
See, in Alan Wake 1, it was true that Thomas Zane was a poet. Like, it was provably true. It seems that somehow reality has shifted, probably due to Alan Wake changing reality from the dark place, and changing details about Zane. This gets more confirmed in Alan Wake 2, but it is an interesting little setup here. It's not clear if the psychiatrist was working with the Bureau, or if the Bureau just happened to get, like, the recordings afterwards, but the psychiatrist does attempt to convince Jessie that her parents and Dylan died, and Polaris is an imaginary friend, which sounds like a lie the Bureau would say to try and cover something up, so maybe the psychiatrist is working with them. And lastly, in Jessie Therapy, Slide Projector, Jessie mentions that her and Dylan always used to play at the dump, but when they had found the projector for the first time, the dump had shifted or changed in some way, and the psychiatrist makes Jessie almost gaslight herself into thinking if this is even true.
We used to play there all the time. Me and Dylan. And other kids as well. We loved it. This time, I remember, was different. We found a way in. Deeper into it, like it had shifted. We went inside, and that's where we found the slide projector.
A dump is a place for lost things. Things that have been thrown away. Did you ever feel that way when you were growing up, Jessie?
What? No. Yes. But that has nothing to do with...
Was there a slide projector at your home when you were small?
No.
Those were before your time, I suppose. But your family did look at photos together, maybe. In one form or the other?
Maybe.
Let me ask you this. As a child, did you ever fantasize about worlds inside pictures? Inside a painting? You know, stepping into a painting? Into a hidden world, escaping and finding adventure there, away from your parents.
I don't think so. I don't remember. Maybe. I don't know.
Trench is actually a pretty interesting character, and while I only talked about him relating to, like, the direct events of the plot, there's actually a lot more to him than just being the director who became corrupted. 3 more hotline calls give a better understanding of the man from both before and after he became so paranoid. In the hotline message, Prime Candidates, Trench says that after becoming the director, he basically immediately moved to finding more prime candidates because he didn't want to leave the Bureau with, like, no director, similar to what happened with Northmore, but also he feared, like, he wouldn't be good enough. Trench says P1 to P5 were all disappointing or dead ends until he had found P6, aka Dylan. Trench had seen a lot of hope and potential with Dylan. When you factor that Dylan had no parents anymore, and he already had supernatural powers, it was pretty much perfect to just groom this this kid into becoming the director. Trench had feared failing the boy, alluding to how he failed his family, and finally reveals the backstory he had been alluding to previously.
He'll be trained and taken care of. Darling can be in charge of this project. I can't. I'll stay away. I will not fail the boy like I failed my own family, my daughter and my wife. We weren't careful enough back then. Something came home with me. I took work home. My Susanna got sick. When I realized my mistake, I wanted to bring her here for Darling to do what he could. Kate flat out refused. Civilian doctors treated our daughter, but they didn't have a clue. She died. Kate left me, Same old story. That was a long time ago. The Bureau is all I have now. And the prime candidates are our future. There are two, P6 and P7. We're spoiled for choice.
So Trench had failed to protect his family from his job, and in the end, we met the Trench that died in that office. The Trench that only had the Bureau left. This can be heard in the hotline Endless Grind, given at the end of the game, in which Trench depressingly states what his life is after losing his family.
My reflection trapped in the darkness of the coffee I nurse. The rain turns the lights of the city into a mosaic on the windows. The day's paper lists all the things wrong in the world. The list grows longer by the day. The difference between the morning and the night? Coffee. Whiskey. No other difference. The alarm goes off at 5 a.m. It feels like I just closed my eyes. It's dark. I sit up on the bed in the gloom. I get up, I shower. The driver waits for me downstairs, takes me to the oldest house. An old man stares at me in the car window. It's raining. It's dark. Late at night, he brings me back here. It's not a home, it's a room where I sleep in, waking up just as tired as I was before going to bed. Endless grind.
See, through dialogue, you can just kind of tell Trench was not like Northmore. He didn't want the supernatural power. He wasn't, like, greedy for power. He didn't want it to become uncontrollable. In fact, he didn't really trust any of the supernatural world, especially after losing his family. He saw the supernatural threats as something that needs to just be put down, like secure under lock and key. He was never concerned with trying to understand all of the supernatural stuff like Darling was. Don't worry, I will talk about Darling later. Trench just sort of saw himself as the necessary security force. The guy who was just supposed to be untrusting of everything because that's his job. Unfortunately, as we know, Trench had become infected by the Hiss, and that paranoia had spread from being just the supernatural stuff, which is understandable because the supernatural stuff had torn apart his family, to just being paranoid about everyone. And he basically thought he was the only one who was right. He shows a big part of the theme in the game, the theme of control. Haha, I know. He's the result of what happens when you try to sort of force yourself or force absolute control over something. When you don't allow yourself to trust anybody and you don't let anything in and you only accept yourself, naturally you end up in a position of trenches where you just kind of die alone. The final hotline message that I want to talk about is called The Coming Storm, which in my opinion is implied to be Trench's final thoughts before he shoots himself.
Something's coming. The whispers growing louder. The worst winter storm in Bureau history. A retribution for my sins. Our sins. This threat could destroy the Bureau. Everything I've built. Destroy me. A web spun, turning this place against me. I catch glimpses of it in the corner of my eye. It's just out of reach. Elusive. It's clever. A perverse game of hide and seek. Is this part of an attack? Obfuscating the facts. Dimming my eyes. It's hard to tell. I need answers. I haven't heard back from Darling. I fear for my friend, my closest ally. I think we made a terrible mistake all those years ago. That thing he studies is putting us all in danger. It's my duty as director to keep the Bureau safe. It'll be difficult. What's done can't be undone. There's no easy fix. Magical thinking is a requirement for survival. Pain and suffering are mandatory. To change things, you have to break yourself. I don't know if I have the strength. I'm old and weak. I'm afraid. I can see my hands trembling. I'm losing control.
He reflects on the incoming threat and even mentions Darling, seemingly almost showing regret to how he treated him before the hiss kind of makes him go back into saying that Hedron is the threat. It's almost as if Trench was still there, like the human of him was just buried deep under hiss, and he has a little infliction of showing regret about how he just treated what was supposed to be his closest friend. At least it seems that Darling was supposed to be that. Darling was on his management team before the hiss side of him kind of came back and made him like the paranoid Trench again. See, when Trench had shot himself after opening the door, it's never made clear if the hiss made him shoot himself or if he chose to do it himself. But here's my theory. I think Trench realized what he had done. He realized he had been compromised for years. He had been manipulated by the hiss. He'd become even more paranoid than he already was, and he realized he opened the door and screwed the Bureau over, and that he's a massive threat to the entire Bureau, and the hiss can control him now. So he did the only thing he could. He stopped himself because the hiss had control over him. Now, you might be wondering, wouldn't the hiss want to get rid of him too? And here's the thing. The hiss had infected Trench for what was implied to be years. They were successful to the point that they made him open the door. So, wouldn't the hiss want to keep him around? Like, he's the guy who can use the service weapon. He has supernatural powers, at least some. He has contact with the board, which the hiss was trying to infect. We know that for sure. It just seems pretty useful to keep the now corrupted director alive and fighting for the hiss. Not to mention, Trench's final words to me anyway sound like he's aware of what he has to do, and he did it to stop himself. Not to mention, I think it's just thematic. I mean, you have to look at the thematicness of that. I don't want to sound like I'm reaching here, but Trench was the guy trying to maintain control of his work, which literally handles supernatural horrors, and he was trying to maintain control of his family and maintain control of himself for years, and he had failed having control over any of those three. He wasn't a great leader of the Bureau in the end because he had become corrupted and paranoid. He couldn't protect his family, and he couldn't even trust himself because he was manipulated by some bigger entity that was way bigger than he was. So in the end, he took control of the one thing he could. He took control of his own death. He chose what was going to happen with him. And I think that is so incredibly interesting and tragic. He's a very interesting and tragic figure in the game. I think he represents the core of the game very well about, the idea of control in your life. And I wanted to give him, the real depth he deserves, as well as the voice actor. Rest in peace, James McCaffrey, by the way. Man, you did so good. Fuck, that final Trench message is so good. I go back and I just listen to it sometimes. And very lastly, and what I want to end this video on, Darling. As I said before, I have mentioned Darling when he was brought up in parts of the story or some collectibles, but the Darling videos and what happens to Darling are rather separate from all of that, and I didn't want to distract from anything else. This final section is going to be completely dissecting all of the Darling videos I did not show, which is a lot of them, and sort of what became of Darling and my thoughts on all of it. To recap, because it's been a little while, Darling was the head of the research sector and one of Trench's most trusted friends and colleagues. The two had become conflicted when Darling seemed to know about the hiss attack and produced HRAs to combat the hiss infection, while Trench thought the HRAs were the enemy and Darling was compromised. We never see Darling or talk to him directly in the game, but he does send that one message through the hotline, and also that amazing video, greatest video in the game. The first few videos I'll discuss here are more about Darling himself and his general research and what he says about some of the game's concepts, and then the late videos are more specific of what happened to Darling. Most of the Darling videos have dates, so a timeline can be constructed, and I've inferred where the videos that don't have dates would be placed, just in my interpretation. So I'll be going in my own timeline order. Your timeline may be a little bit different, but again, most of the videos do have dates, so we can confirm at least a majority of it. I will not talk about every single Darling video, because A, I've already shown some, and B, a couple of them aren't really that important. So Yeah, but I will be showing most of them here, and we'll begin. In the video Altered World Events, Darling explains AWEs and says they all link to common images or objects, which was similarly discussed in Collectibles.
These forces gravitate toward archetypal objects, a gun, a television, a supposedly haunted house. So clearly humanity affects this process. Our collective unconscious is a map of sorts. We hold the key, but we don't know how to use it. We create these archetypes through everyday life, popular culture, urban legends, but we are observing and influencing a complicated system in action. We can change the likelihood of something being a receptacle for these forces just by thinking about it. But we haven't found a method to control the outcome. And yet, there's something unique in us, in our dreams, in the conceptual reality with power, with our minds. What's the cause and what's the effect? Are we the starting point or just a necessary evil in this? A byproduct, a reflection, a projection? We'll struggle to find the answers to these hard questions, or die trying.
Him saying that humanity somehow affects the process of an AWE links back to the collective unconscious collectible, that humans thinking about common items enough or images somehow like imbues them with a supernatural power. But it seems to be clear that Darling believes in this collective unconscious theory, which I think is an interesting note that kind of foreshadows a bit what happens later. In the Altered Items video, Darling says altered items always result from AWEs, and that they are always in the form of everyday objects, which is true for the altered items we see in the game. He explains more about if altered items are exactly sentient.
Are altered items sentient? Not quite. They're often fixated, programmed almost to cause certain events to happen over and over again. While generally less potent than objects of power, they are not able to be controlled. Left unchecked, they can be highly dangerous.
In the Black Rock video, Darling explains what Black Rock is, and that it's an extra-dimensional matter that can block out a lot of frequencies and keep things generally stable. That part of the video isn't notable. What's notable is the awkward interaction Darling has with Emily at the end.
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but I need the code for the quarry elevator.
Oh, Emily, the codes, BlackRock 665, Neighbor of the Beast. Get it? We can do that again if you...
The mention of 665 is an interesting but small detail. 665 and the line Neighbor of the Beast is a commonly referenced, like, sort of image or, I guess, symbol. Yeah, let's go with that symbol. It's a commonly referenced symbol in Remedy. Max Payne had referenced it. Control references it a little bit earlier. However, to link the exact mention of it to another collectible and what I might think about it, here is what the board says in their message, Objects of Power. Objects of Power are holders /665. So to me, this implies that the Black Rock Quarry, because again, Darling mentioned 665 in the Black Rock Quarry, and Objects of Power are incredibly powerful, but that power might be close to evil because they are close or sort of tread the line of being evil. It's certainly an intentional detail because 665 also is specifically brought up in Alan Wake 2, so the number may apply to things that are just powerful but dangerous. I also just like the interaction Darling has with Emily because of how awkward it is. Like, every time we see Darling in the videos, he comes off as this confident and knowledgeable guy. He's clearly, like, smart and accomplished. But this one weird little interaction that is unlike anything else we ever see of Darling, and it's a moment where he's not prepared, and it implies he may just be trying to come off as something he's not, something more confident in front of the camera or in front of other people, but in reality, he's more shy and reserved and kind of quiet and a little bit weird. Basically, I'm saying Darling may try to make himself look like something he isn't quite, which parallels what happens to him. This is also a good time to really quickly bring up one document collectible, Sensory Tank Purpose, which is a letter from Darling. Most of the letter isn't notable, it's just Darling saying he ordered sensory deprivation tanks to be brought in for the epic Kojima tapes. However, he very chillingly foreshadows his own fate by saying, quote, "I think we could all benefit from some time in a dark, enclosed space. Don't you?" And I just want you to remember that line for just a little bit, because I am getting into the videos that are more about what becomes of Darling. It's also worth mentioning that every video before this has someone holding the camera, while the last Darling videos, which I believe are the rest of them, have the camera still, implying he was just constantly alone here. From the video Ordinary to the rest of the videos, Darling will appear more and more visibly disheveled and tired. In the Ordinary video, he's completely fascinated by the Ordinary case, and by Dylan more than anything else.
The boy, Dylan Faden, prime candidate 6. And the sister as well. Once we catch up with her, but the boy, so much potential. We're talking Northmore level readings here. And I don't want to invoke his name, but it's completely different circumstances here.
The camera cuts to what looks like a different day, and Darling stands in front of a wall of papers with a big P6 written on them.
There was an incident. Yes. We lost a valuable member of our team, yes. Excessive force. Dylan has so much. But he's just a kid. I'll take the blame. He needs some slack. I mean, boys will be boys. He's exceptional and under a lot of stress. Roberts got killed. It's an unfortunate accident, that's all. Marshall needs to realize this. We will make this work. We'll make this work.
Darling again references Roberts, the first person Dylan killed, but he's still enamored with Dylan and with the Ordinary case. He even goes as far as to say he'll take the blame for Dylan killing Roberts, and that just shows how much Darling kind of believed in Dylan, to the point where it was pretty much a fault. In Slidescape 36, the title card shows the video is classified. This is one of only 2 Darling videos that say classified, and the second one is the next one, so whatever was discussed in both of these videos, Darling wanted as few people as possible to see. Darling describes the Slidescape 36, otherwise known as Hand, both the slide itself and the doorway it opens. He says there's no sound in the slide world, and resonance blocks the radio, and he mentions there were casualties, which Trench also mentions, before mentioning something else.
Correction, resonance from an unknown source, in part within the range of audible frequency. It acts in unpredictable ways, causing feedback loops that can tear you apart. Trench insists he heard something else. It made his ears bleed. Our equipment found no evidence of anything beyond the primary resonance. Trench's medical tests show nothing amiss.
The first expedition was the one where the hiss had infected Trench, like we know that for sure, and Darling not looking totally convinced that Trench was fine may imply that he always kind of knew or suspected that Trench was compromised by the hiss, and his possible suspicion of Trench may be why the video was classified, because it was trying to restrict Trench from seeing it. Just a thought. I'm probably reading it too far into that. In the next video, Hedron, which is taken sometime after the Bureau's 3rd expedition into the slide, Darling talks about what they found.
It is an entity, a living organism of a considerable mass. I've named it Hedron based on its physical shape, the part that we can perceive. I honestly think there's the resonance it emits, the frequencies. We've never seen anything like it. We've built a container for it, and we brought it in. This changes everything. It's beyond our understanding. We have brought so many questions with us through that hole in the wall. I will dedicate... I'm never going home.
So Darling is in awe of finding Hedron, right? The Hedron container that we see at the end of the game anyway, because we never actually see whatever Hedron is. So we can only imagine whatever it is Darling sees, but it completely just takes him over from this point on. In HRAs, Darling appears even more and more tired, and he acknowledges people don't really know what the HRAs are or what they're for.
Regarding HRAs, what are they for? Do you always need to wear them? And what's the deal with the Hedron resonance anyway?
He then accidentally knocks over a mug, showing he's only getting more uncoordinated and all over the place. The video cuts and Darling attempts to explain the HRAs.
As a life preserver. Only instead of water, the thing HRAs protect you from is classified. One day that classified not water might pour in, and you'll be glad you got an HRA keeping you afloat. And if you don't have an HRA, don't worry. It'll be quick and painless. Kidding. I'm kidding. We're making more.
To me, I think it's clear he can't rationalize in words why he made the HRAs. Like, Hedron had warned him clearly about something that was coming. And although Darling never, seems to know it's exactly, oh, the hiss is coming, he still panicked because he was warned about some threat, and he made the HRAs. But he couldn't really explain that why to anyone because, well, A, some of the information was classified, and B, he couldn't really prove that Trench was infected, and C, I imagine it's probably hard to say to your colleagues, hey, we're going to be attacked by a supernatural force, but I can't explain why or what or when. Please wear this vest. In Dylan Faden, Darling comes to a realization about Dylan.
Dylan's a lost cause. I know I struggled to see this, but we contained him now. I wish I had sided with Marshall. Back when it was just one person. So many dead. I thought his youth was an asset. Just too much too soon.
This is also the video we see a part of in-game where Darling says he's creating the new dimensional research section and going there, but the ordinary section's gonna stay. Given the context, it seems Darling wanted to both literally and figuratively kind of move away from Dylan, so he just started an entire new section in the Bureau that kind of allowed him to study his fascination with the Slide and Hedron, but without Dylan. It's possible he still had some hope, because he did specifically say the ordinary section remains as is, and he even says he may return before trailing off. In Resonance, Darling attempts to explain resonance, but it's more unintelligible and very broken.
Hedron is communicating with me. He's trying to warn me of something imminent. I've been using every known method to analyze the data. Exposing myself to it. I'm seeing things and overcome by compulsion. It's not just data, it's protection. It's benign. We are about to be exposed to a different kind of resonance. Hostile, viral, invasive resonance. That's what the Hedron resonance amplifiers are for. Taking the protection Hedron can provide us and keeping us from being wiped out.
In large-scale HRA, Darling appears in just an undershirt and underwear before taking off his shirt and discussing his final plan.
It's done. With just one large-scale HRA. It's an easy choice, no choice. It's there now. Protecting the most important thing from what's coming. I'll be there inside, locked in, ready to be blown away. Commencing countdown, engines. Ready for the journey. To be Bowman flying into the model. Ready to see. To understand.
So Darling is going to lock himself inside of Hedron, in a mix of what seems to be panic from what Hedron had warned him of, but also a sort of utter fascination as to what Hedron is. He even references the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. In 2001, the main character Bowman flies into the monolith, which is this like unknowable Lovecraftian kind of object that's been around since like the dawn of humans, and Darling is kind of doing the same thing, even though Darling seems to know what being locked in Hedron will mean for his physical human form. And finally, the very last Darling video, taken from inside the Hedron container called Final Message, and I'll just let this one play in full.
I'm Dr. Casper Darling, and this is my final message. It's not the end. But after this, I won't. I exposed myself to Hedron resonance fully. It's changing me. I've seen. I've been shown so much. Slidescape 36 was where Hedron stopped the spread of another. It's terrifying. It really is. It's another source of resonance. Trench was exposed to this other. It will now spread. I've done everything I can to stop the Hedron resonance amplifiers. I don't know if it'll make a difference. I won't be here when it happens. I should have told him anymore. I'm being sent one more lesson. Something wonderful, I think.
Darling walks out of frame, implied to have become a part of Hedron or Resonance itself. We get more details as to what happened with Darling in Alan Wake 2, but I want to leave it ambiguous here, just like the game did. Darling's fate is this mix of fascination and horror, and shows his main flaw was this sort of, maybe not obsession, but need to understand the supernatural in Hedron. He wanted to understand and be able to explain everything, to sort of be in control of the powers that be. And in the end, he was willing to basically fly into the sun just to see what would happen. And he ties the theme of control in Control together. Darling shows that there are just some things in this world we simply can't know. Like some mysteries we will just never figure out the answers to. And while that's unsatisfying, accepting that and not trying to chase everything is a lot better than just chasing ghosts. See, we learned Northmore had lost control of his powers and got locked in a cell. Trench had lost control of himself and his bureau and had been manipulated before dying. And Darling lost control of what he wanted to understand and became something else. All three weren't able to control something that they wanted to, desperately wanted to, and they had met some kind of unfortunate end. But Jessie, at the end, declares that she will run things differently, because she can control the one thing that a person can control, which is themselves. You can't control circumstances, you can't control other people, you can't control the world itself, but you can control you. One of Alan Wake's themes is about free will and sort of the idea of if we have it or not. Control is more about that we do have free will, but that it can result in good and bad outcomes. And learning from others' mistakes, that's a pretty good use of that control. Or maybe I'm just going crazy and seeing a bunch of things that aren't there because I've been working on this video for like 4 months. So that is the end of the video, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the very recent Control 2 trailer, which is incredibly hype. I do recommend checking it out. I don't have a ton to say because it's just one trailer. I think it looks cool. It's a little bit disappointing that we don't see Jesse, like gameplay-wise, in the game. I think it is interesting that we seem to play as Dylan. I think that could be a very cool, like, sort of perspective. I feel like because Alan Wake 2 has 2 different playable protagonists with Alan and Saga, I feel like Control is probably gonna do that with Dylan and Jesse. I feel like that's just a good chance. I think it would fit with Control well. I think the board mentioning like the sibling is on vacation is a neat reference to like Jesse is on vacation similar to Ahti, which I think was just funny. But yeah, the game looks pretty fucking hype. I like that Manhattan looks fucked up. I mean, of course, I will always love The Oldest House as a setting. It's a very cool setting. But setting 2 games in The Oldest House, it could just kind of get repetitive. So sort of broadening the scope and making it like all of, well, not all of New York, but just a big part of the city and all of Manhattan, and sort of making it look like Inception, which it's definitely inspired by, is really cool. And I think that trailer just looks awesome. But again, I don't have too much to analyze there. It's just one trailer. That will do it for this video. Again, stay tuned for what will probably be the next one, which will be on the DLCs of Control. If you are truly at this end, thank you for watching. I do actually hope you enjoyed it. This has been a video I've wanted to make for a really long time, along with my Alan Wake video. And I don't know how long it's going to take to edit, but when it's made, it's made. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.